This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good morning. Today is Thursday, January 30th. I'm Don Ma, starting out with the tragic plane crash near Reagan National Airport last night. All 64 people on board American Eagle Flight 5342 are now feared dead after a mid-air collision with an Army helicopter. Officials discussed the crash and the investigation.
Despite all those efforts, we are now at a point where we are switching from a rescue operation to a recovery operation. At this point, we don't believe there are any survivors from this accident, and we have recovered 27 people from the plane and 1 from the helicopter.
Safety is our expectation. Everyone who flies in American skies expects that we fly safely, that when you depart an airport, you get to your destination. That didn't happen last night. And I know that President Trump, his administration, the FAA, the DOT, we will not rest until we have answers.
This morning, we all share in a profound sense of grief. I do want to thank the first responders who acted quickly last night, who ran towards danger, went into a very frigid river, and have worked throughout the night.
And additionally, we have members of our GO team that are on ground here in D.C., and they're being deployed with resources to do everything that we can to take care of the needs of the families and the loved ones of the passengers and crew members.
Officials have yet to recover the aircraft's black boxes, which could provide key details about the crash. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy called the accident absolutely preventable. He said both aircraft were following standard procedures before impact. The National Transportation Safety Board is leading the investigation to determine what went wrong. Meanwhile, Reagan Airport is set to reopen at 11 a.m. today. And a big day in the Senate with 2 more of President Trump's nominees in the hot seat. Trump's pick for Director of National Intelligence and FBI Director will face questions from lawmakers, and RFK Jr. faces his second hearing before a Senate committee. Here's what to expect this morning.
Tulsi Gabbard and Kash Patel will appear before Senate committees Thursday. They're both key national security nominees. President Trump nominated Gabbard as his Director of National Intelligence. The former Congresswoman from Hawaii currently serves as a lieutenant colonel in the Army Reserve. Gabbard is likely to face questions about her views on foreign policy. She has described herself as a military hawk when it comes to tackling terrorism abroad, but has spoken out against what she once called counterproductive wars of regime change. She has criticized U.S. intervention in Syria. She also supports a negotiated settlement to the Russia-Ukraine war. Gabbard's critics in the Senate have accused her of spreading false claims in support of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said Wednesday it wouldn't be unreasonable to ask if Gabbard would use the DNI to, quote, push false intelligence for political ends. But Senate Republicans say her record is clean. Gabbard has also spoken out against domestic surveillance laws like Section 702 of FISA, which she described as a blank check to trample Americans' civil liberties. Meanwhile, Democrats have accused Kash Patel, Trump's pick for FBI director, of promoting conspiracies about the 2020 election. And Senator Richard Blumenthal says he plans to question Patel on his views on the QAnon movement. Patel has criticized what he calls corruption and politicization in the FBI. In September, he said if he were put in charge of the agency, he would shut down its headquarters in Washington on day 1. Another controversial nominee, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., is scheduled for one more Senate nomination hearing on Thursday. On Wednesday, the Senate confirmed former Congressman Lee Zeldin as the director of the Environmental Protection Agency. Trump picked Zeldin to lead the EPA's effort to reverse many of the Biden administration's rules, including on drilling emissions and electric vehicles. Among the EPA's main actions under Zeldin will be to review the so-called endangerment finding. That's the agency's determination that greenhouse gases harm human health. As a New York congressman, Zeldin voted against legislation on green issues.
Meanwhile, President Trump has signed into law the Laken-Riley Act, the first legislation to get to his desk in his second term. Along with the legislative win, Trump also announces a new move to send illegal immigrants to Guantanamo Bay. White House correspondent Iris Tao has more.
President Trump signed into law the Laken-Riley Act, which would require federal officials to arrest and detain illegal immigrants who have been accused of crimes like theft, assault on police officers, or causing the death or serious injury to others. And President Trump, while signing the act, highlighted the case of Laken-Riley, a Georgia nursing student who was brutally killed by an illegal immigrant. Watch.
She was a light of warmth and kindness in every single room. With today's action, her name will also live forever in the laws of our country, and this is a very important law. This is something that has brought Democrats and Republicans together.
And notably, the Laken-Riley Act was passed in Congress with not just Republican support, but also with the support of dozens of Democratic lawmakers, Trump highlighting that bipartisan support. Meanwhile, the parents and the sister of Laken-Riley were also at the signing ceremony today. Her mom, speaking emotionally, thanks President Trump for keeping his word to protect the border and remembering her daughter's name.
There's no amount of change that will ever bring back our precious Laken. Our hope moving forward is that her life saves lives. We're so thankful that her passion for helping others and her legacy for doing good in the name of Jesus Christ will carry on. Thank you.
And during the signing ceremony, President Trump also announced a new order to send up to 30,000 illegal immigrants, or what he calls worst of the worst, to Guantanamo Bay. And President Trump's border czar Tom Homan, talking to us on the White House campus, told us that that's already actually expanding an existing migrant center at Gitmo. Watch.
Detain the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening the American people. Some of them are so bad we don't even trust the countries to hold them.
The significant public safety threats, we can fly them. We fly. We're doing it. We're already doing it.
We identified and stopped $50 million being sent to Gaza.
Happening now, the Senate confirmation is underway for Tulsi Gabbard, President Trump's pick to be Director of National Intelligence. We're going to tune into that.
I also note that our next Attorney General, Pam Bondi, is joining us. Apparently, she didn't have enough fun at her own confirmation hearing. Ms. Bondi, welcome and congratulations. And finally, Senator Joni Ernst and former Senator and Chairman of this committee, Richard Burr, will introduce Ms. Gabbard shortly. We look forward to your remarks. I think it's fair to say that Ms. Gabbard's nomination has generated a bit more interest and attention than do most nominees before this committee. But I want to stress that Ms. Gabbard has been and will be treated with the exact same respect, consideration, and professionalism that we extended to every nominee. No more, no less, no better, no worse. That's how we treated CIA Director John Ratcliffe just 2 weeks ago, and how we have treated DNI nominees like Avril Haines and Dan Coates in the past. For instance, Ms. Gabbard has conducted dozens of office meetings with senators. She has completed the committee's standard questionnaire. She has answered 247 questions in writing. This is all in keeping with the committee's customs, precedents, and rules. Before I address the important work ahead at the DNI, please also let me make two observations about some of the accusations about Ms. Gabbard. First, I'm dismayed by the attacks on Ms. Gabbard's patriotism and her loyalty to our country. For instance, Hillary Clinton has smeared Ms. Gabbard, calling her an asset of a foreign nation. Let me remind everyone that Ms. Gabbard has served in our Army for more than 2 decades. She has multiple combat tours, and she still wears the uniform to this day. She has undergone 5 FBI background checks. I spent more than 2 hours last week reviewing the latest, putting eyes on more than 300 pages. It's clean as a whistle. It's fine that we have differences of opinions on policies and programs. I suspect some of my Republican colleagues might disagree with some of Mrs. Gabbard's votes in the House of Representatives. Just as I suspect that some of my Democratic colleagues might criticize Ms. Gabbard's statements and actions since she saw the light and left the Democratic Party. But I sincerely hope that no one today will impugn Ms. Gabbard's patriotism and integrity. Second, I can only laugh at some critics who say that Ms. Gabbard has unconventional views. No doubt she has some unconventional views, like her criticism of Barack Obama's regime change interventions in Egypt and Libya. But guess what? I opposed the disastrous interventions in Egypt and Libya as well. Mubarak was a longtime American partner, and Egypt was a linchpin of our security system in the Middle East. Gaddafi had been scared straight after we toppled the Taliban and Saddam Hussein. He turned over his weapons of mass destruction and cooperated against terrorists. In return, we had lifted sanctions and reestablished diplomatic ties. But President Obama intervened to topple both regimes. And what came next? The Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and dangerous chaos in Libya to this day. No one ever mistook Mubarak or Gaddafi as the little sisters of the poor. But let's not kid ourselves. The world is a dangerous place, not a church picnic. Ms. Gabbard understands this, which is why she also saw the problem with regime change interventions in these places. The vast number of governments throughout history and still today are not democratic. We may wish it were different and we can work to improve it, but that's the way the world is. If we only befriended nations that shared our system of government and our social and cultural sensibilities, well, we wouldn't have many friends. In a fallen world, we have to take our friends where we find them. No question, stable democracies make the most stable friends, but what matters in the end is less whether a country is democratic or non-democratic, and more whether the country is pro-American or anti-American. I'll confess that those views may be somewhat unconventional, but look at where conventional thinking has got us. Maybe Washington could use a little more unconventional thinking. And I'm sure that the Office of the Director of National Intelligence could use more unconventional thinking. Ms. Gabbard, I submit that if confirmed, the measure of your success will largely depend on whether you can return the ODNI to its original size, scope, and mission. When Congress created the ODNI, we intended to put one office in charge to manage the different agencies of the intelligence community. Congress intended the ODNI to be a very lean organization that would use small staffs to execute specific tasks. Congress in no way wanted yet another unruly bureaucracy layered on top of an already bureaucratic intelligence community. Unfortunately, 20 years later, that's exactly what the ODNI has become. Incredibly, the ODNI now is now larger than any agencies it was established to manage. It has 15 offices and centers, which have many subunits within them. The ODNI staff is measured in the thousands, when it should be measured in the dozens, or maybe a few hundred. I promise that's going to change. I intend to get personnel at the ODNI back to their home agencies doing real intelligence work, not bureaucratic make work. I also expect to cap the size of the ODNI. Ms. Gabbard, if confirmed, I hope you'll be a partner in these vital efforts. Another example of bureaucratic mission creep and empire building is what's come to be known in the intelligence community as DNI taxes. The ODNI levies these so-called taxes on other agencies, shifting and directing funds away from the intelligence community's core mission to the whims and fancies of any particular DNI. That practice, which seems to have grown and run rampant under Director Haynes, is also going to stop. Ms. Gabbard, if confirmed, you have a lot of work ahead of you. And as chairman of this committee, I'm committed to ensuring that we see it all the way through. At this moment, I'll now recognize Senator Risch for a brief statement.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. And I want to thank Ms. Gabbard for meeting with me and having the candid conversation we did on the issues. Unfortunately, I have to chair the Foreign Relations Committee. We have our first substantive meeting today on malign influence of China here at home and abroad. So I'm not going to be able to stay for the hearing. I'm not going to get a chance to ask questions. However, we are going to have a closed session immediately following, and the questions I have trespass upon the security of the country, and as a result of that, they need to be done in a classified setting in any event. So if I beg indulgence to be excused to preside over the other committee, good luck. I know you'll do well. Thank you.
You are excused.
I was going to leave whether you excuse me or not, but thank you very much.
I will now recognize the Vice Chairman, Senator Warner, for his opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and particularly thank your comments at the top. I've spent most of the morning at National Airport. I know Senator Moran was there last night. It's a horrible tragedy. The victims' families are still being notified. For those of us who live in this region, you know, it's always kind of complicated. We've got Virginia, DC, Maryland, and a host of local jurisdictions. But last night, when this tragedy took place, and I happened to be driving by National on the way home and saw all the first responders rushing to the scene. People came from as far away as Baltimore, Fairfax County. We had DOD and federal officials there. And these first responders, as always, ran towards the tragedy. There'll be a time to figure out what happened and how we rectify it. But today, our thoughts and prayers ought to be with the families, and again, thanking our first responders. Ms. Gabbard, welcome. And congratulations on your nomination to be the next Director of National Intelligence. I'd like to begin by thanking you, literally, for your decades of public service, both in uniform and as a member of Congress from Hawaii. I applaud your continuing commitment to serve should you be confirmed. Now, the President has nominated you to be Director of National Intelligence. Most folks probably don't understand the importance of this position. If confirmed, you would lead 18 agencies of the IC. You'll also serve as the principal advisor to the President, the National Security Council, and the Homeland Security Council for all intelligence matters related to national security. And in this role, you'll be responsible for over $100 billion between the National Intelligence Program and the Military Intelligence Program, or the NIP and the MIP as we call them here. It's a position of great importance and significance to our national security, created after one of our worst national security failures, 9/11. For that reason, when Congress established this position, thanks in large part to our colleague and our friend Susan Collins, it mandated in law that any individual nominated for this position must have, and I quote, extensive national security expertise. Now, I appreciated you taking the time to meet with me, and as I noted in that office, both before and after, I continue to have significant concerns about your judgment and your qualifications to meet the standards set by law. First, as I noted previously, the DNI was created in part to make sure we had appropriate intelligence sharing, which prior to 9/11, obviously we haven't. But the mission also is to not only share information between the IC, but also with our allies. There's no legal requirement that our allies share intelligence with us. It's all predicated on trust. Trust that our allies will protect each other's secrets. It appears to me you have repeatedly excused our adversaries' worst actions, and instead often blame them on the United States and those very allies. For example, you blame NATO for Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. You rejected the conclusion that Assad used chemical weapons in Syria, despite it being the unanimous assessment of the then Trump administration's DOD, State Department, and IC, as well as the assessment of our European allies. Instead, you blame the United States for supporting terrorist groups in Syria. Now, I don't know if your intent in making those statements was to defend those dictators, or if you were simply unaware of the intelligence and how your statements would be perceived. In either case, it raises, at least for this senator, serious questions about your judgment. It also leads me to question whether you can develop the trust necessary to give our allies confidence that they can share their most sensitive intelligence with us. Make no mistake about it. If they stop sharing that intelligence, the United States will be less safe. We've seen this as recently as this past year, where because of those strong intelligence sharing between the United States and Austria, countless lives were saved by disrupting a terrorist attack that was going to take place at the Taylor Swift concert in Vienna. Second, you have been publicly outspoken in your praise and defense of Edward Snowden, someone who betrayed the trust of our nation and jeopardized the security of our country. The truth is, the vast majority of the information he stole and leaked before running off to China and Russia, might I add, had nothing to do with Americans' privacy and compromised our most important sources and methods. And in many ways, we're still paying a price for that. And I believe that Edward Snowden's action put our men and women in uniform in places like Iraq and Afghanistan at risk. You have celebrated Snowden as a, quote, brave whistleblower, and actually put forward legislation asking for his pardon. Furthermore, when given the opportunity to clarify your position in pre-hearing questions, you declined. And instead, you expressed, and again, I quote, the DNI has no role in determining whether or not Edward Snowden is a lawful whistleblower. Boy, that is troubling to me in so many ways. Not only do you think that someone who divulged secrets and then ran off to Russia should be celebrated as brave, but you don't seem to understand the DNI's role in determining whistleblower determinations. In fact, the DNI has a significant role in transmitting lawful whistleblower complaints to this committee. They're all laid out right here in the statute. And I would have serious concerns about confirming someone who cannot distinguish between complaints that are made lawfully and those that are made not. In the statute, it says the job of the DNI is to protect intelligence sources and methods from unauthorized disclosure. That's a quote. I guess I'm asking, what message would it send to have a DNI who would celebrate the work of a member of the IC or a contractor that would, on their own mission, to decide what's appropriate to leak? I don't understand that. Third, until recently, you had a clear and consistent record of opposing FISA 702. I know members on this committee already understand how important this is, but for folks who don't, this law is critical to our national security. Literally 60% on average of what goes into the president's daily brief, what President Trump will read each day in assessing what's going on in the world, comes from this important piece of law that allows us to seek out those foreigners abroad for coverage. And it's helped prevent terrorist attacks. It helps us prevent foreign cyber attacks. It helps us on a topic that a lot of folks are looking at, fentanyl trafficking. Now, many in this Congress and many on the committee have tried to reform this legislation to better balance security and civil liberties. However, you have consistently gone further. Not only did you vote against reauthorizing 702, you actually introduced legislation to fully repeal the whole thing, calling it again, quote, a blatant disregard for our Fourth Amendment constitutional rights. Now, I understand that since you've been nominated to be DNI, you've expressed a change of heart. I think that's welcome. But I have to tell you, as I view this as a job interview, as I try to make my judgment on whether you should be confirmed, I don't find your change of heart credible. Because the world today is more complex and more dangerous than ever before. And we need serious people with sufficient experience to be able to navigate that complexity. I hope you use this opportunity to address my concerns and all of the members of this committee. I appreciate again your service, and I'm looking forward to a thorough discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. We welcome back Senator Richard Burr, the former chairman of this committee who has emerged from retirement to introduce Ms. Gabbard. Yet still in retirement, he still seems unable to find a pair of socks. Nonetheless, we say thank you and welcome you back, Senator Burr.
Some things are very predictable, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman Cotton, Vice Chairman Warner, members of this distinguished committee, I want to thank you for allowing me to join you today to provide my thoughts and support on behalf of Tulsi Gabbard's nomination to be Director of National Intelligence. This is my first visit back to the Senate in slightly over 2 years. Permit me to say, from this side of the dais, you're not as intimidating as I thought when I was on your side of the dais. When I was chairman of this committee, Senator Warner and I stuck to a single refrain with our staff: follow the facts wherever they lead. Today, an anonymous person or group launching a campaign using rumors as sources and accusations as fact can drive the outcome of an election and of public opinion. I know it to be true. Remember, I sat in your chair for the Russia investigation, where we found much of the influence to be the result of fictitious narratives driven by Russia. Now, some of you may be wondering, why do I support Tulsi Gabbard and why am I here to introduce her as a nominee? I've experienced firsthand a coordinated attempt to influence this nominee's support in the United States Senate and with the American people. I was contacted by several national journalists shortly after the president nominated Tulsi, asking me to confirm one of the many rumors circulating about this nominee. I informed each journalist over a 5-week period that the rumors shared with me was simply not true. This narrative was shared from one journalist to the next journalist to the next journalist. I assume today they ran out of journalists. This was a coordinated effort to kill this nomination. Advise and consent is the responsibility of the United States Senate, and I truly believe that each member takes it seriously. All members of this committee were offered the opportunity for individual meetings with Tulsi, and if you chose not to meet with her, it's on you. I've done my homework, and here are the facts. Tulsi Gabbard's historic life began at birth. She's the first American Samoan-born member of Congress, period. She graduated from Hawaii Pacific University with a degree in business administration with a concentration in international business. In 2002, at age 21, Tulsi became the youngest woman in America ever elected as a state representative. That was not enough. In 2003, she joined the Hawaii National Guard. When deployed, in her re-election, her opponent raised the issue, could you serve the people that elected you if, in fact, you were deployed? What did Tulsi do? She withdrew from a re-election campaign in order to continue to serve our country in the war on terror. This would not be the first or the last time Tulsi put her country above her career. After multiple deployments and serving in the Hawaii City Council, she was elected to the United States House of Representatives, where she served 4 terms. Throughout her political career, she maintained her military service either in the National Guard or the Army Reserve. Media stories and anonymous rumors have questioned her qualifications, her patriotism, and whether she can be trusted, just to name a few. I refuse to question the qualifications of a woman who's worn the uniform of her nation for 22 years and never taken it off. No fewer than 5 times has the Department of Defense reviewed her security clearance and extended it. Every single time. If Tulsi's guilty of anything, it's that since she was born, her views, opinions, and beliefs have evolved to reflect her life's experiences. Winston Churchill once said, "Those that never change their minds never change anything." She served her city, her state, her country, while winning the support of the people she represented. She's fought in war, and yes, she's tried to stop wars. At the ripe age of 43, Tulsi has the life experiences that match or exceed most members of Congress. Tulsi was serving in uniform 3 years before some of us here today voted to create the Director of National Intelligence. Chairman Cotton, Vice Chairman Warner, members of the committee, it's my honor to support and to introduce to the committee Lieutenant Colonel Tulsi Gabbard. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Burr. Now our colleague, Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa, has taken a few minutes out of her very busy schedule to be here to introduce Ms. Gabbard as well. Senator Ernst.
Thank you, Chairman Cotton and Ranking Member Warner. And good morning to my distinguished colleagues. I also do want to take a moment this morning to recognize the lives that were lost in the collision near DCA last night. It is a truly heartbreaking tragedy. My prayers are with the victims' families and their loved ones. So thank you. Duty, honor, service. These are not just words. They are principles that have guided Lieutenant Colonel Gabbard. As a young enlisted soldier in the Hawaii National Guard, Tulsi answered the call to duty upon her deployments to the Middle East. From graduating at the top of her class from the Accelerated Officer Candidate School at the Alabama Military Academy, the first woman to do so, to serving as the youngest member of Hawaii's legislature, she upheld honor while breaking barriers both in uniform and in her civilian leadership roles. And today, Lieutenant Colonel Gabbard demonstrates her commitment to service by sitting before this committee, prepared to answer the nation's call yet once again, this time as the next Director of National Intelligence. Tulsi and I share similar backgrounds, both to our nation and to our communities. We've worn the same uniforms, serving in the Army National Guard and Army Reserves, leading battalions and deploying to Iraq and Kuwait. We've both had the privilege of serving in our state legislatures and in Congress, representing the people who shaped our lives and our communities. Tulsi exemplifies what it means to rise above partisanship, putting the needs of the American people over political divisions. She put her own life on the line in combat operations and now has set aside partisan differences as a former Democrat member of Congress to answer the call to serve in a Republican administration. The mainstream media has fought to paint their own picture of Tulsi Gabbard. But let's talk about the real Tulsi Gabbard, the woman and the soldier who I've come to know and respect. And I've known Tulsi for the past decade. Relationships matter. In 2015, then Congresswoman Gabbard met my dear friend Owen, who was a dear friend of mine from Iowa State University. Owen was a wounded special operations warrior who embodies the resilience and strength of our military community. Owen was the subject of an attack in Afghanistan, where he lost his leg and his left eye serving in the war. After this attack, or during this attack, Owen was tossed into the dead pile. Owen, bleeding and in excruciating pain, cried out to his teammates, "I'm not dead." Thankfully, his fellow warfighter attended to Owen. But the road to recovery was long and hard, including a stint at Walter Reed Medical Center. During this time, Owen met a fellow warrior and patriot, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, who became a friend, and today they remain in touch. Owen prides himself in being a very good judge of character. And Tulsi, he speaks volumes of your character. Owen's final message to me before this hearing was, Tulsi has maintained her integrity throughout her career. She's the same gal I met in 2015. She always makes time for our old, broken warriors. And colleagues, I will leave you with this. You know me. I trust Tulsi Gabbard. She will be honest with you. She will listen to your concerns. She will be receptive to your feedback. And rest assured, Lieutenant Colonel Gabbard loves this country, a fact proven by her willingness to put her life on the line to defend it. For over 20 years, she has put on the uniform and checked her political views at the door with one mission in mind: to protect and defend our great United States of America. Tulsi, duty, honor, and service have marked your life. Thank you for your extraordinary dedication to our nation, for embodying the values that make our military the best in the world, and for stepping up to serve yet once again as President Trump's Director of National Intelligence. Relationships matter. I urge my colleagues to support this nomination. My best wishes to you, Tulsi, and to your family. God bless our country. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. I know that Senator Ernst has a busy schedule to include a hearing for Dan Driscoll, the Secretary of Army nominee at the Armed Services Committee. I'm sure Senator Burr has to go on a fishing trip or something. So we will excuse both senators from the witness table. Ms. Gabbard, before we move to your opening statement, it is the custom of the committee to ask a series of obligatory questions to all nominees. First, do you swear or affirm to give this committee your full and truthful testimony?
I do.
Second, do you agree to appear before the committee here or in other venues when invited?
Yes.
Third, if confirmed, do you agree to send officials from your office to appear before the committee and designated staff when invited?
Yes.
Fourth, do you agree to provide documents or any materials requested by the committee in order for it to carry out its oversight and legislative responsibilities?
I do.
Fifth, will you ensure that your office and your staff provide such material to the committee when requested?
Yes.
Sixth, do you agree to inform and fully brief, to the fullest extent possible, all members of this committee on intelligence activities and covert actions rather than only the chairman and the vice chairman?
Yes.
Thank you for those answers, Ms. Gabbard. We now welcome the opportunity, finally, to hear from you in your own words.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Before I begin, I too would like to start by offering my prayers and condolences to those who were killed in last night's horrific crash. Senator Warner, Senator Moran, our condolences and prayers are with you and all of your constituents. Again, Chairman Cotton and Vice Chairman Warner and all of the members of the committee, it's an honor to be here before you today. I've appreciated the opportunity to meet with so many of you and address your questions and concerns before today's hearing. I know they've gone, but I'm grateful to Senators Burr and Ernst for their trust and their confidence in taking time to join us here today. To my husband, Abraham, my family, friends, fellow veterans, Medal of Honor recipients, and patriots, thank you for your love and support. I'm honored and grateful to President Trump for his trust and confidence in nominating me to serve our country as the Director of National Intelligence at a time when trust in the intelligence community, unfortunately, is at an all-time low. Chuck Schumer admitted a few years ago, quote, "You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you." For too long, faulty, inadequate, or weaponized intelligence have led to costly failures and the undermining of our national security and God-given freedoms enshrined in the Constitution. The most obvious example of one of these failures is our invasion of Iraq based upon a total fabrication or complete failure of intelligence. This disastrous decision led to the deaths of tens of thousands of American soldiers and millions of people in the Middle East, mass migration, destabilization, and undermining of the security and stability of our European allies, the rise of ISIS, strengthening of Al-Qaeda and other Islamist jihadist groups, and strengthening Iran. Here are just a few other examples. The American people elected Donald Trump as their president not once, but twice. And yet the FBI and intelligence agencies were politicized by his opponents to undermine his presidency and falsely portray him as a puppet of Putin. Title I of FISA was used illegally to obtain a warrant to spy on Trump campaign advisor Carter Page, using a Clinton campaign-funded false dossier as their so-called evidence. Biden campaign advisor Tony Blinken was the impetus for the 51 former senior intelligence officials' letter dismissing Hunter Biden's laptop as disinformation specifically to help Biden win the election. Former DNI James Clapper lied to this committee in 2013, denying the existence of programs that facilitated the mass collection of millions of Americans' phone and internet records, yet was never held accountable. Under John Brennan's leadership, the CIA abused its power to spy on Congress, to dodge oversight, lied about doing it until he was caught, and yet has never been held responsible. Under Biden, the FBI abused its power for political reasons to try to surveil Catholics who attend traditional Latin Mass, labeling them as quote-unquote radical traditionalist Catholics. Personally, just 24 hours after I criticized Kamala Harris and her nomination, I was placed on a secret domestic terror watch list called Quiet Skies. Sadly, there are more examples. The bottom line is this must end. President Trump's re-election is a clear mandate from the American people to break this cycle of failure, end the weaponization and politicization of the intelligence community, and begin to restore trust in those who've been charged with the critical task of securing our nation. If confirmed as DNI, I will do my very best to fulfill this mandate and bring leadership to the intelligence community with a laser-like focus on our essential mission, ensuring the safety, security, and freedom of the American people. As the president's principal intelligence advisor, I'll begin by leading by example, checking my own personal views at the door, and committing to delivering intelligence that is collected, analyzed, and reported without bias, prejudice, or political influence. I enlisted in the Army because of the horrific terrorist attack on September 11th and volunteered to deploy to Iraq in 2005, where I served in a medical unit. After nearly 22 years in uniform with 3 combat deployments to the Middle East and Africa, I'm now a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve, where I serve as a battalion commander of soldiers in Oklahoma, Missouri, and Arkansas. I served in Congress for 8 years on the Homeland Security, Foreign Affairs, and Armed Services committees. And it's my experience in the military and in the halls of Congress that have given me a deep understanding of the complex challenges that our nation faces, in both roles engaging with world leaders, in both roles being privy to highly classified intelligence. So I know firsthand how essential accurate, unbiased, and timely intelligence is to the president, to Congress, and to our warfighters. I also know the heavy cost of intelligence failures and abuses. Senator Collins, you led the creation of ODNI specifically to address those intelligence failures of 9/11 and Iraq's so-called WMDs. The need for the ODNI under strong leadership still exists today. If confirmed, I'll bring my experience and fresh eyes to leading the intelligence community. And my day one priorities will be to assess the global threat environment, identify where gaps in our intelligence exist, integrate intelligence elements, increase information sharing, and ensure that unbiased, apolitical, objective collection and analysis to support the president and policymakers' decision-making occur. I'll work to end the politicization of the intelligence community and ensure there is a clear mission focus in the IC on its core mission of this unbiased, apolitical collection and analysis of intelligence to secure our nation. I'll work to rebuild trust through transparency and accountability. This is a national security imperative. And I'll work to assess and address efficiencies, redundancies, and effectiveness across ODNI to ensure focus of personnel and resources is on our core mission of national security. In my meetings that I've had with many of you, you expressed bipartisan frustration about recent intelligence failures, as well as the lack of responsiveness to your requests for information. Whether it's the surprise October 7th Hamas terrorist attack, to the sudden takeover of Syria by Islamist extremists, failures to identify the source of COVID, anomalous health incidents, UAPs, drones, and more. If confirmed, I look forward to working with you to address these issues. Ensuring the safety, security, and freedom of the American people is a mandate of leadership that rises above partisan politics. If confirmed, my commitment to the president, to you, and to the American people is this: I will do my very best to find the truth, no matter where it leads, and share that truth with President Trump, his advisors, and you in Congress, providing you with that unbiased, timely, and accurate intelligence as you make the tough decisions that'll impact the safety, security, and freedom of the American people. Now, before I close, I want to warn the American people who are watching at home. You may hear lies and smears in this hearing that'll challenge my loyalty to and my love for our country. Those who oppose my nomination imply that I am loyal to something or someone other than God, my own conscience, and the Constitution of the United States, accusing me of being Trump's puppet, Putin's puppet, Assad's puppet, a guru's puppet, Modi's puppet, not recognizing the absurdity of simultaneously being the puppet of 5 different puppet masters. The same tactic was used against President Trump and failed. The American people elected President Trump with a decisive victory and mandate for change. The fact is, what truly unsettles my political opponents is I refuse to be their puppet. I have no love for Assad or Gaddafi or any dictator. I just hate Al-Qaeda. I hate that we have leaders who cozy up to Islamist extremists, minimizing them to so-called rebels. As Jake Sullivan said to Hillary Clinton, quote, Al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria. Well, Syria is now controlled by an Al-Qaeda offshoot, HTS, led by an Islamist jihadist who danced in the streets on 9/11 and who was responsible for the killing of many American service members. Democrat senators in the past resorted to anti-Christian bigotry against some of President Trump's judicial nominees like Amy Coney Barrett and Brian Boucher. I condemn those actions as a Democrat in Congress at the time, as religious bigotry must be thoroughly condemned by all of us, no matter the religion. Unfortunately, there are some Democrat senators who still don't understand the principle of freedom of religion and Article 6 of the Constitution. Quote, no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. Unfortunately, they're once again using the religious bigotry card, but this time trying to foment religious bigotry against Hindus and Hinduism. If anyone is sincerely interested in knowing more about my own personal spiritual path of Hinduism, I welcome you to go to my account on X, where I'll share more on this topic. If confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, I will continue to live by the oath that I have sworn at least 8 times in my life, both in uniform and as a member of Congress. I will support and defend our God-given freedoms enshrined in the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. Thank you very much for your time. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Gabbard. A few reminders before we begin our 5-minute round of questioning. First, a reminder to the audience, once again, I will not tolerate disruptions or disturbances, either in favor of or in opposition to Ms. Gabbard. We all came to hear from Ms. Gabbard, not from you. 2 reminders to my colleagues. We'll have a 5-minute round of questions. Not 5.5, not 6, 5-minute round. We will also have a closed session after this hearing in which you'll have another 5-minute opportunity to ask questions. Second, if any question, as Senator Risch alluded to, begins to approach the line of classified material, my crack staff will advise me and I will ask you to hold the question until we get to a closed setting.
Mr. Chairman, could I just inquire? I was under the understanding that if in the open round, because this is the only time the American people will be able to see this judgment, you'd agreed if certain members needed to ask a second round of questions in the public setting, that would be available.
As is our custom, if a member waits until the end of the opening round and has a follow-up question, then we will permit that follow-up question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Gabbard, if confirmed, you'll be entrusted with our nation's most important secrets. We're all entrusted with that information to serve the American people and to keep our country safe. Unfortunately, as you said in your opening statement, we've seen too many instances in recent years of people who were trusted with classified information and went on to abuse and politicize that trust. For example, in October 2020, more than 50 former intelligence officers, many of whom still held a top secret clearance, wrote a letter invoking their credentials to make false claims about Hunter Biden's laptop, likely being Russian disinformation. Do you agree that this was an example of intelligence professionals abusing and politicizing their past positions and credentials?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I do, and it is an example of what needs to end and why the American people elected President Trump to bring about those necessary reforms.
Thank you. Will you commit that no one who abuses his past position and credentials in this fashion will hold a security clearance in the future?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, I want to be fair to my Democratic colleagues. Such abuses aren't just a problem on the left. Also in 2020, President Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton, published a book in which he revealed sensitive conversations with the president on national security matters, including highly classified information. He didn't submit this book for review and approval to ensure that our national security secrets were protected. Do you agree that John Bolton's actions likewise undermined public trust?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Will you commit that no one who so abuses his past position and risks the exposure of classified information by publishing a book without submitting it for review and getting approval before publication will hold a security clearance again or be trusted with classified information again?
Yes.
Thank you. Let's move on to the topic of ODNI reform that I mentioned in my opening statement. Congress originally envisioned the ODNI to be a small coordinating agency that directs, rather than replicates, the now 18 constituent agencies that make up our intelligence community. Over the years, however, the ODNI has strayed from this vision to an organization that now publicly boasts nearly 2,000 people, more than half of whom are not detailed from an intelligence agency, but rather are career ODNI bureaucrats. They've even developed centers that are producing their own analysis. Will you commit today to working with this committee to restoring the ODNI to its original size, scope, and function?
Yes, Senator, I look forward to working with you and the committee as I, if confirmed, assess the current status of who is working in the ODNI and the function that they fulfill to make sure of its effectiveness and elimination of redundancies and bloating.
Thank you. Do you support some of the policy proposals I mentioned in my opening statement about capping the size of the ODNI, eliminating ODNI taxes, returning employees back to their home agencies to do real intelligence work?
Yes, Senator, I look forward to working with you as we assess where the ODNI needs to be in order to fulfill its core mission and function.
Thank you. And in your preparation for this hearing and this important responsibility, have you developed any thoughts that explains the mission creep and the empire building that we've seen at the ODNI in recent years?
Yes, Senator, I've had the opportunity to review the history of the ODNI, to speak to Ambassador Negroponte, the first Director of National Intelligence, as well as others who have served in this position. I think there are a number of contributing factors to the creation of centers, or not centers, but offices like the recently eliminated Office of DEI within ODNI, and other areas where I need to go in and assess the replication and the duplication of responsibilities that exist elsewhere and some of the other intelligence elements that ODNI has oversight over.
Thank you. Colleagues, I will lead by example and yield back 1 minute of my time and recognize the Vice Chair.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is a first. Ms. Gabbard, let me be clear, at least in my views. I salute your service to our country, but I have serious doubts about your judgment. And those are some of the areas that I want to pursue. First, until you were nominated by the president to be the DNI, you consistently praised the actions of Edward Snowden, some who, I believe, jeopardized the security of our nation, and then, in an effort to flaunt that, fled to Russia. You even called Edward Snowden, and I quote here, a brave whistleblower. Every member of this committee supports the rights of legal whistleblowers. But Edward Snowden isn't a whistleblower. And in this case, I'm a lot closer to the chairman's words, where he said Snowden is, quote, an egotistical serial liar and traitor who, quote, deserves to rot in jail for the rest of his life. Ms. Gabbard, a simple yes or no question. Do you still think Edward Snowden is brave?
Now, Mr. Vice Chairman, Edward Snowden broke the law. I do not agree with or support with all of the information and intelligence that he released, nor the way in which he did it. There would have been opportunities for him to come to you on this committee or seek out the IG to release that information. The fact is, he also, even as he broke the law, released information that exposed egregious, illegal, and unconstitutional programs that are happening within our government that led to serious reforms that Congress undertook.
Chairman, we got 5 minutes. So I take your answer, and these are your quotes. Brave, please join my bipartisan legislation calling for charges to be dropped against him. Do you disagree that legislation was not appropriate? Do you believe he is brave or not?
Yeah,
back those words.
Once again, Senator, Edward Snowden broke the law.
We're pausing on this hearing to go to another one. President Trump's nominee to lead the FBI, Kash Patel, is now testifying at his Senate confirmation hearing. Let's tune in.
Do you believe what a large part of what makes America an exceptional nation is the rule of law?
It is one of the fundamental precepts that determines that.
And why is that?
Because without a singular application of a rule of law, we go back to the Uganda that my father fled in Idi Amin.
I believe that the two most important institutions in America to preserve and protect and enforce the rule of law are the FBI and the Department of Justice. And the sort of politicalization that Senator Graham and others have already talked about during the Crossfire Hurricane investigation or project of James Comey at the FBI and the abuse of intelligence tools like Title I of Section 702 are a betrayal of American values and adherence to the rule of law. And I think your biggest task is going to be, along with Pam Bondi at the Office of the Attorney General, is to restore the rule of law to the Department of Justice and the FBI. Are you willing to do that?
Absolutely, Senator.
Without regard to partisan affiliation or politics?
Absolutely.
Do you believe President Trump, as the commander-in-chief, needs access to all of the lawfully available intelligence that can be collected by the American intelligence community in order to inform him so that he can make good judgments as commander-in-chief to assure the safety and security of the American people?
Having been responsible for the collection and predication and promulgation of that intelligence, I firmly believe he and every president must have it.
And so you would not support any impractical or perhaps immaterial or unworkable ways to inhibit the flow of that information to President Trump?
No, I would not.
So let me just ask you, you and I have talked about this a number of times, and this has come up before in a number of different contexts. But as I've always said, I think Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act is the most important law that most Americans have never heard of. Yeah. But when I was questioning my fellow Texan, John Ratcliffe, who now has been confirmed as the director of the CIA, about this, we talked about some of the reforms that have been made to Section 702 over the years. This has been an ongoing conversation here in Congress. People like my colleague here, Senator Lee, and others have proposed reforms, which I think have gone a long way to help protect the privacy rights of American citizens. But let me just point out some of the improvements that have been made over the years. This is not the same 702 that was in effect during President Trump's first terms. These are a number of things that we did together on a bipartisan basis to make sure that the balance between the national security interests of the American people and the privacy and constitutional rights of American citizens were protected. Do you agree with that?
Yes, Senator, I do.
And I think Senator Tillis, with his typical outstanding graphics, has a wonderful handout which lays all of that out. But one of the things that's come up, and we've discussed this, is the idea that in order to query lawfully collected intelligence under Section 702, that somehow, if a U.S. person's name is involved, that a warrant would be required. Now, you're a lawyer who's represented defendants as a public defender. You understand that what probable cause is required, what sort of evidence is required to be produced to a judge in order to get a warrant. Do you believe a warrant requirement is a practical and workable or even a necessary element of 702?
If I may just give some context on that, Senator. Having a background not only utilizing FISA and 702 as a national security prosecutor, but as a civilian at JSOC and later as an intelligence official and the Deputy Director of National Intelligence, 702 collection formulates over 45% of the presidential daily briefing that you referred to earlier.
I actually have heard it's as high as 60%, but anyway, it's a lot.
It's a lot. And the issue for me is not with FISA and 702. The issue has been those that have been in government service and abused it in the past. And so we must work with Congress to provide the protections necessary for American citizens. Dealing with these matters, including hostage rescue operations in real time, which we use FISA collection to find and save American hostages, having a warrant requirement to go through that information in real time is just not comportive with the requirement to protect American citizenry. I'm all open to working with Congress on finding a better way forward, but right now, these improvements that you've made go a long way.
Well, and Director Ratcliffe said that he did not believe that, given the context of 702 collection, whether a foreign target communicates with a U.S. person, that there'd be sufficient evidence to go to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court or any other court to demonstrate probable cause. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, just in real time, Senator, excuse me, it's almost impossible to make that function and serve the national no-fail mission.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you point out the lack of trust. Any of these tools can be abused by people who are willing to break the law or abuse these tools or violate the public trust. Director Ratcliffe again used, I thought, a helpful analogy. I'll see if you agree with it. He said the knives in your kitchen have a very useful and beneficial purpose, but they too can be misused do you agree with that?
Absolutely, Senator.
And similarly, do you agree that tools like Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act can be used appropriately to protect national security, but they can also be abused by people who are willing to cross a line they should not cross.
They're both true, and that's why we need to work together to make sure Americans have trust again in these surveillance measures that we utilize to protect our country.
Thank you.
Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Patel, I think you know that I have great respect for the men and women of the FBI, their mission, fidelity, bravery, integrity. I believe they deserve a director who respects their work and sacrifices, and they deserve a director who's focused on their mission. This is not about bingo cards or games. This is not about revenge. This is about the safety of our country and the people that work in the FBI. And the FBI runs on facts, it runs on truth. Truth matters, and without truth, the whole system breaks down. You said that Donald Trump has every right to tell the world that in 2020, 2016, and every other election in between was rigged by our government because they were. Yes or no, did you say that?
I don't have that statement in front of me. But
okay, that was from August 27th, 2023, Thrive Time show. I'll put it on the record. These claims made in that statement were rejected by courts, including by Republican judges. Is that correct?
I don't have enough of the facts in front of me to make that assessment.
I will put that statement on the record, but I think everyone in this committee, including the Republican members, knows that these statements were rejected by courts. You were asked about the police officers in the Capitol who testified in the January 6 hearings, and you accused them of lying. Is that correct or not correct?
I don't think that's accurate.
Okay, Joe Packed podcast, March 2024, we'll put it on the record. I was there. The police officers were heroes that day.
Yes.
Did you post on your personal social media account in May of 2024, January 6th, never an insurrection, cowards in uniforms exposed. They broke the chain of command.
I believe you're referencing a post that was shown in part earlier. I don't have it in front of me.
You posted it, and it was on your account, and we will again put that out there once more as we go on. I don't want to lose any more time on this, but every one of these, there's a record of it, and you haven't answered. You promoted a COVID vaccine reversal or detox supplement. One scientist said, I quote, "None of these substances in any form would minimize side effects from a COVID-19 vaccine." That is preying on innocent people. Did you perform clinical trials before you made that claim?
I'm not a doctor, so no.
But you did promote this supplement and told people that it would reverse or mitigate the side effects from COVID vaccine.
Did I give people an opportunity to make an independent choice for what's best for their families? Yes.
You did that last year, correct?
I don't have it in front of me again, Senator.
Mr. Patel, the FBI tackles some of the most complex threats that we face: terrorists, hostile foreign powers, violent gangs, fentanyl, criminal organizations. Your mission, though, has been to go after people. I've looked at it. I've read this stuff. Yes or no? When Trump wins, did you say this? When Trump wins in 2024 and is in power in 2025, we can prosecute them, referring to Justice Department officials for an actual RICO statute violation, for criminally organizing the United States government to break the law to rig presidential elections. Did you say that, yes or no?
Again, Senator, you're reading a partial statement, so I'm unable to fully respond.
Okay, again, we'll put it on the record. X22 report podcast 20, that is from, I'll get you the date, about a year ago. One of the names on your list was Bill Barr. Chairman Grassley has called him one of the most capable cabinet officials I've ever been able to vote for. Senator Graham has said, I have nothing but total respect and admiration for the job done by William Barr as Attorney General of the United States. Is Bill Barr on your list of whatever you want to call them, been referred to as an enemies list? You've called them deep state after serving his country as the Attorney General of the United States. Is he on your list because of a personal vendetta?
Well, it's not whatever we want to call it, Senator. With all due respect, it's not an enemies list. That is a total mischaracterization.
I asked you, I actually used the words you used for the list, which was deep state, right? That's what you put at the top.
It is a glossary
against
in
the
the
Attorney
back.
General of the United States. Is it because of a personal vendetta that he's on the list? You're under oath.
I have no personal vendetta against Bill
Okay,
Barr.
he said about you, you would never be able to command the respect necessary to run the day-to-day operations of the Bureau. That was actually in writing in his book. He had virtually, about you, no experience that would qualify you to serve at the highest level of the world's preeminent law enforcement agency, and that your appointment, as noted by Senator Durbin as Deputy Director to the FBI, would happen over his dead body. Is it, yes or no, why you would put him on the list of deep state as a former Attorney General, Trump Attorney General of the United States, because he wouldn't break the law for Donald Trump? Is that why?
Absolutely not.
As you know, he repeatedly told the president in no uncertain terms that he did not see evidence of fraud that would have affected the outcome of the election. Did you say in February of 2021 that the election stuff was never my job and I stayed out of that stuff?
Again, I don't know what comment you're referring to, but I'm sure you're reading a piece of something.
You said it on Pushback on a podcast. Is it true, though, that in December of 2020, you reached out to the Trump acting Deputy Attorney General and asked him to investigate a conspiracy theory claiming that people in Italy had used military technology and satellites to remotely tamper with voting machines in the U.S. and switch votes for Trump from Trump to Biden? Is that true?
What was the date?
That was out of December of 2020.
I was Chief of Staff to the Department of Defense, so I don't believe that's accurate in any way.
Okay, that came out of testimony before Congress. I will give it to you. Have you referred to the media as the most powerful enemy of the United States that they have ever seen? Is that right?
Again, you're reading a quote. I take that you're reading it accurately.
CPAC 22324. You said we're going to come after the people in the media who lied about American citizens who helped Joe Biden rig the elections. We're going to come after you, whether it's criminally or civilly. Is that something you said?
That's a partial statement of what I said.
Steve Bannon's podcast. You also said you would put the entire fake news mafia press corps on your list. Is that correct? Is that what you said?
I don't have that in front of me.
Benny Johnson's podcast, 82123. You have said that the FBI, including today, you said that they remain utterly corrupt. This is an agency with agents who have taken down terrorists, taken down bank robbers, taken down crime. And you wrote that the FBI has become so thoroughly compromised that it will remain a threat to the people unless drastic measures are taken. Do you know that under Chris Wray's leadership, he took over at a very difficult time, we all know that, appointed by President Trump, that during his tenure, the applications to the FBI has in fact tripled? Do you think people would be applying to that agency like in those numbers if they thought it was so corrupt?
The American public's trust in it is at 40%. That's an all-time low.
Did you say that the FBI headquarters should be shut down and reopened as a museum of the deep state?
Mr. Chairman, are we allowed to go an extra time?
Let's see. You get a second round. Before I call on Senator Lee.
Could he just answer the question if he said that the FBI headquarters, where they investigate cybercrime and terrorism, should be shut down and opened as a deep state?
Hey, Mr. Chair.
As a museum. Did he say that the headquarters should be shut down?
Mr. Chair.
I deserve an answer to that question. He is asking to be head of the FBI, and he said that their headquarters should be shut down.
Mr. Chair, parliamentary inquiry.
You got anything you want to say, Mr. Patel, before I go on to Senator Lee?
Simply this. If the best attacks on me are going to be false accusations and grotesque mischaracterizations, the only thing this body is doing is defeating the credibility of the men and women at the FBI. I stood with them here in this country. In every theater of war we have, I was on the ground in service of this nation. And any accusations leveled against me that I would somehow put political bias before the Constitution are grotesquely unfair. And I will have you reminded that I have been endorsed by over 300,000 law enforcement officers to become the next director of the FBI. Let's ask them.
Mr. Chairman, I am quoting his own words from September of 2024. It is his own words. It is not some conspiracy. It is what Mr. Patel actually said himself. Facts matter.
You forget that you had 3 minutes in the next round to say what you just said.
Okay, I'll say them again.
Okay. before I call Lee.
Mr. Chair, just parliamentary inquiry, and it was on time. It wasn't disputing any of the debate, but I intend to keep to my 7 minutes, and I appreciate you keeping everyone to it. If we go over, can we have that decrement against the time in the second round? If a member goes over, that was actually 10 minutes, Mr. Chair.
I'm not sure that I want to. Sometimes it's faster to get things done here, just letting people shout and than it does to shut them up.
Mr. Chairman, you're a wise man, Mr. Chair. Thank you,
Mr.
Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, before we go to Lee,
Mr. Chairman.
Yes. What do you want?
I love this guy. Mr. Chairman, I'm unlike Senator Tillis. I mean, if we're going to start this, I want an extra 3 minutes.
Well,
now, my friend Senator Klobuchar went 3 minutes over.
So, here what you're saying is the chairman wasn't a very good chairman by not shutting her up. But I've gone through this before, and I think I know how to handle it and get this done.
I think you're a star-spangled awesome chairman. I just want to say that for the record. But if you're going to let somebody over there go 3 minutes over, I want my extra 3 minutes.
Well, let's see if it's abused by anybody else before we make that decision.
I'm just telling you, I'm going to abuse it.
Well, I'm not going to let you abuse it.
You're a good man, Mr. Chairman.
Before I go to Lee, I want to put a statement in the record from 56 former FBI agents wrote to this committee to support this nominee. Quote, never has the FBI faced such an urgent and compelling need for comprehensive reform as it does today. Mr. Patel has proven he possesses the breadth of experience required to address these challenges. His leadership, expertise, and vision make him uniquely qualified to guide the FBI through this pivotal moment. For these reasons, we stand in full support of Kash Patel's nomination. Any objection? So ordered. Mr. Lee.
Mr. Patel, while we're talking about your awards, let's talk about the cowards in uniform comment for a moment, can we?
Please.
Would you like to tell us what that was? Put it in context to help the committee understand what that was about.
I think it's important. Thank you, Senator. During that time on January 6th, I was serving as Chief of Staff at the Department of Defense. And days prior, we had received the authorization from the President to issue the National Guard to protect you and your colleagues. But as you know, the law requires a request before the deployment of that guard. That request did not come in until the afternoon of January 6th. Once that request came in, this unfortunately, as has been confirmed by his own testimony, I believe, the Secretary of the Army, Ryan McCarthy, failed to immediately deploy the National Guard and instead took a break to speak to media and make personal phone calls. That endangered the safety of you and your colleagues. And if you look at the Biden Inspector General report, we at the Department of Defense authorized the fastest cold start of the National Guard since World War II and the largest occupation since the American Civil War. And the Biden Justice Department said that we, including myself, as Chief of Staff, when it came to the deployment and employment of the National Guard, acted swiftly and without undue delay.
So that's what you were talking about. And that's why you had the reference to the UCMJ. Tell us what that means.
The Uniform Code of Military Justice is for uniform officers who betray the code of justice and also act inappropriately. And I thought any delay to have the National Guard arrive on scene here must be called out, whether it was a fellow Republican or not, especially someone under my auspices running the Department of Defense.
Okay, so moments ago when Senator Durbin displayed a chart with that quote, there was a reference in part of it to the UCMJ. That's what it was referring to.
Yes, sir.
Those were the cowards in uniform. Those people who didn't do what they were supposed to do, and a lot of people were put in danger as a result.
That's correct, Senator.
Okay, thank you. That's very good to know. I do find it significant that we've heard all kinds of aspersions cast in your direction by people who do not know you, by people who do not share your worldview, by people who do not share your commitment to the Constitution or your commitment to public service. I find it astounding that they're willing to say this amidst such great ignorance, and I find it equally heartening that the 56 former FBI officials who know you best, who have worked with you, who actually know who you are, who actually share your view of the Constitution, of the view that you ought to be a law enforcement agency and not a weapon of political warfare. These are the people who stand by you. Those who cast aspersions don't share those views. Would I be correct in surmising that?
Yes, sir.
Let's talk about the Fourth Amendment for a moment. The Fourth Amendment tells us that in order for the government to breach your expectation of privacy relative to your person, your home, your papers, if they want to search that, if they want to seize you, they've got to get a warrant. And that warrant has to describe with particularity the persons or places to be searched or to be seized and to connect them up with a showing of probable cause. Now, in the case of FISA 702, we're dealing with a somewhat different universe. Now, moments ago, we heard some discussion about FISA 702, about suddenly we've got a different FISA 702 than what we had when President Trump was last in office. Is that true? Because by my count, FISA 702 has not changed substantively since.
Breaking news, President Trump is speaking now on the tragic mid-air collision that occurred at Ronald Reagan National Airport near the nation's capital. Let's watch.
Thank you very much. I speak to you this morning in an hour of anguish for our nation. Just before 9 p.m. last night, an American Airlines regional jet carrying 60 passengers and 4 crew collided with an Army Black Hawk helicopter carrying 3 military service members over the Potomac River in Washington, D.C., while on final approach to Reagan National Airport. Both aircraft crashed instantly and were immediately submerged into the icy waters of the Potomac. Real tragedy. The massive search and rescue mission was underway throughout the night, leveraging every asset at our disposal. And I have to say, the local, state, federal, military, including the United States Coast Guard in particular, they've done a phenomenal job. So quick, so fast. It was mobilized immediately. The work has now shifted to a recovery mission. Sadly, there are no survivors. This was a dark and excruciating night in our nation's capital and in our nation's history, and a tragedy of terrible proportions. As one nation, we grieve for every precious soul that has been taken from us so suddenly. And we are a country of, really, we are in mourning. This is really shaken a lot of people, including people, very sadly, from other nations who were on the flight. For the family members back in Wichita, Kansas, here in Washington, D.C., and throughout the United States and in Russia, we have a Russia contingent, some very talented people, unfortunately, were on that plane. Very, very, very sorry about that. Whose loved ones were aboard the passenger jet. We can only begin to imagine the agony that you're all feeling. Nothing worse. On behalf of the First Lady, myself, and 340 million Americans, our hearts are shattered alongside yours, and our prayers are with you now and in the days to come. We'll be working very, very diligently in the days alongside yours, and our prayers are with you now and in the days to come. We'll be working very, very diligently in the days to come. We're here for you to wipe away the tears and to offer you our devotion, our love, and our support. There's great support. In moments like this, the differences between Americans fade to nothing compared to the bonds of affection and loyalty that unite us all, both as Americans and even as nations. We are one family, and today we are all heartbroken. We're all searching for answers. That icy, icy Potomac, it was a cold, cold night, cold water. We're all overcome with the grief for many who have so tragically perished, will no longer be with us. Together we take solace in the knowledge that their journey ended not in the cold waters of the Potomac, but in the warm embrace of a loving God. We do not know what led to this crash, but we have some very strong opinions and ideas, and I think we'll probably state those opinions now. Because over the years, I've watched as things like this happen, and they say, well, we're always investigating, and then the investigation 3 years later, they announce it. We think we have some pretty good ideas, but we'll find out how this disaster occurred, and we'll ensure that nothing like this ever happens again. The FAA and the NTSB and the U.S. military will be carrying out a systematic and comprehensive investigation. Our new Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, his second day on the job when that happened. It's a rough one. We'll be working tirelessly. He's a great gentleman. The whole group these are great people, and they are working tirelessly to figure out exactly what happened. We will state certain opinions, however. I'm also immediately appointing an acting commissioner to the FAA, Christopher Rocheleau, a 22-year veteran of the agency, highly respected. Christopher, thank you very much. Appreciate it. We must have only the highest standards for those who work in our aviation system. I changed the Obama standards from very mediocre at best to extraordinary. You remember that. Only the highest aptitude, they have to be the highest intellect and psychologically superior people were allowed to qualify for air traffic controllers. That was not so prior to getting there. When I arrived in 2016, I made that change very early on because I always felt this was a job that, and other jobs too, but this was a job that had to be superior intelligence, and we didn't really have that, and we had it. And then when I left office and Biden took over, he changed them back to lower than ever before. I put safety first. Obama, Biden, and the Democrats put policy first. And they put politics at a level that nobody's ever seen, because this was the lowest level. Their policy was horrible, and their politics was even worse. So as you know, last week, long before the crash, I signed an executive order restoring our highest standards for air traffic controllers and other important jobs throughout the country. So it was very interesting. About a week ago, almost upon entering office, I signed something last week that was an executive order, very powerful, on restoring the highest standards of air traffic controllers and others, by the way. Then my administration will set the highest possible bar for aviation safety. We have to have our smartest people. It doesn't matter what they look like, how they speak, who they are. It matters intellect, talent, the word talent. You have to be talented, naturally talented geniuses. You can't have regular people doing that job. They won't be able to do it. But we'll restore faith in American air travel. I'll have more to say about that. I do want to point out that various articles that appeared prior to my entering office, and here's one. The FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. That is amazing. And then it says FAA says people with severe disabilities are most underrepresented segment of the workforce, and they want them in, and they want them, they can be air traffic controllers. I don't think so. This was in January 14th, so that was a week before I entered office. They put a big push to put diversity into the FAA's program. Then another article, the Federal Aviation Administration, this was before I got to office, recently, second term. The FAA is actively recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and other mental and physical conditions under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiative spelled out on the agency's website. Can you imagine? These are people that are, I mean, actually, their lives are shortened because of the stress that they have. Brilliant people have to be in those positions, and their lives are actually shortened, very substantially shortened, because of the stress, where you have many, many planes coming into one target, and you need a very special talent and a very special genius to be able to do it. Targeted disabilities are those disabilities that the federal government, as a matter of policy, has identified for special emphasis in recruitment and hiring. The FAA's website states they include hearing, vision, missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, epilepsy, severe intellectual disability, psychiatric disability, and dwarfism all qualify for the position of a controller of airplanes pouring into our country, pouring into a little spot, a little dot on the map, a little runway. The initiative is part of the FAA's diversity and inclusion hiring plan. Think of that. The initiative is part of the FAA's diversity and inclusion hiring plan, which says diversity is integral to achieving FAA's mission of ensuring safe and efficient travel. I don't think so. I think it's just the opposite. The FAA website shows that the agency's guidance on diversity hiring were last updated on March 23rd of 22. They wanted to make it even more so. And then I came in, and I assume maybe this is the reason. The FAA, which is overseen by Secretary Pete Buttigieg, a real winner. That guy's a real winner. Do you know how badly everything's run since he's run this Department of Transportation? He's a disaster. He was a disaster as a mayor. He ran his city into the ground, and he's a disaster now. He's just got a good line of bullshit. The Department of Transportation is government agency charged with regulating civil aviation. Well, he runs it, 45,000 people, and he's run it right into the ground with his diversity. So I had to say that it's terrible. Then it's a group within the FAA, another story, determined that the workforce was too white, that they had concerted efforts to get the administration to change that and to change it immediately. This was in the Obama administration just prior to my getting there. And we took care of African Americans, Hispanic Americans. We took care of everybody at levels that nobody's ever seen before. It's one of the reasons I won. But they actually came out with a directive, too white. And we want the people that are competent. But now we mourn and we pray and would like to ask all Americans to join me in a moment of silence as we ask God to watch over those who have lost their lives and bring comfort to the loved ones. And I just want to say God bless everyone in this room. This has been a terrible, very short period of time. We'll get to the bottom of it. So we all saw the same thing. We've seen it many times. I've had the honor of hearing tapes. Tapes are scary, very scary tapes. You had a airliner coming in, American Airlines. He was doing everything right. He was on track. He was the same track as everybody else. They came in. It's probably the same track as they've had for 25 years or more. He's coming in the path. And for some reason, he had a helicopter that was at the same height, obviously when they hit, but pretty much the same height, and going at an angle that was unbelievably bad. When the air traffic controller said, do you see, he was talking about, do you see him? But there was very little time left when that was stated. And then also, he said, follow him in. And then almost immediately after that, seconds after that, there was the crash that took place. Well, you follow him in, that means like everything's fine, follow him in. You had a pilot problem from the standpoint of the helicopter. I mean, because it was visual. It was a very clear night. It was cold, but clear, and clear as you could be. The American Airlines plane had lights blazing. They had all their landing lights on. I could see it from the Kennedy Center tape. We had a tape up on the Kennedy Center. That seems to be the primary thus far. I'm sure we'll see other tapes because it's such an area where there are a lot of cameras looking up into the air, into space. So we'll probably see many other shots of it before too much time goes by. But we had a situation where you had a helicopter that had the ability to stop. I have helicopters. You can stop a helicopter very quickly. It had the ability to go up or down. It had the ability to turn. And the turn it made was not the correct turn, obviously. and it did somewhat the opposite of what it was told. We don't know that that would have been the difference because the timing was so tight. It was so little. There was so little time to think. But what you did have is you had vision. The helicopter had vision of the plane because you had vision of it all the way, perfect vision of it all the way from at Kennedy Center where the tape was taken. And for some reason, there weren't adjustments made. Again, you could have slowed down the helicopter substantially. You could have stopped the helicopter. You could have gone up. You could have gone down. You could have gone straight up, straight down. You could have turned. You could have done a million different maneuvers. For some reason, it just kept going and then made a slight turn at the very end. And you could have gone under it or over it, and nobody realized, or they didn't say that it's at the same height. At the same height, still wouldn't have been great, but you would have missed it by quite a bit. Could have been 1,000 feet higher. It could have been 200 feet lower, but it was exactly at the same height, and somebody should have been able to point that out. So all of this is going to be studied, but it just seems to me, from a couple of words that I like to use, the words common sense, some really bad things happened, and some things happened that shouldn't have happened. So you had a helicopter going in an identical direction. You had a helicopter that was at the exact same height as somebody going in essentially the opposite direction. You had a plane that was following a track, which is a track that every other plane followed. And I don't imagine, I know I've heard today that they might have been following the preceding plane, which was pretty close, but not that close. The preceding plane, but you wouldn't have even been able to see that because of the direction that the helicopter was coming in at. So you had a confluence of bad decisions that were made, and you have people that lost their lives, violently lost their lives. We're going to take a few questions. I'd like to ask our new Secretary of Transportation to say a few words. Sean Duffy, great gentleman, just started. It's not your fault, and I know you agree with me very strongly on intellect and even psychological well-being of the air traffic control. It's such an important position, and I think I can't emphasize stronger. I changed it when I first ran in 2016. I changed it. We had the highest standard that you could have, and then they changed it back. That was Biden. To a standard I read it to you. That was from one of your papers. One of the people in this room actually wrote that. And then I changed it back a few days ago. And unfortunately, that was, we'll see. We don't know that necessarily it's even the controller's fault. But one thing we do know, there was a lot of vision, and people should have been able to see that, at what point do you stop? At what point do you say, wow, that plane's getting a little bit close? So this is a tragedy that should not have happened. Please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I would just note the President's leadership has been remarkable during this crisis. We have had a whole of government response, local, state, federal. And when you see that kind of cooperation, it begins with the leadership in this body. So thank you for that, Mr. President. You make our jobs a lot easier. You made an important point that when we deal with safety, we can only accept the best and the brightest in positions of safety that impact the lives of our loved ones, our family members. And I think you make a really important point on that, Mr. President. That is the motto of your presidency, the best and the brightest, the most intelligent coming into these spaces. I want to take a moment and extend my condolences to the families of the loved ones. We commit to them that we are going to get to the bottom of this investigation, not in 3 years, not in 4 years, but as quickly as possible with the NTSB, who is here today, as well as the FAA. What happened yesterday shouldn't have happened. It should not have happened. And when Americans take off in airplanes, they should expect to land at their destination. That didn't happen yesterday. That's not acceptable. And so we will not accept excuses. We will not accept passing the buck. We are going to take responsibility at the Department of Transportation and the FAA to make sure we have the reforms that have been dictated by President Trump in place to make sure that these mistakes do not happen again. And again, I want to thank you for your leadership, Mr. President, and I appreciate the confidence you placed in me. Thank you.
Pete, would you like to say something?
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Again, I want to echo what the Transportation Secretary said about your leadership. From the moment we found out about this, we were in contact with the White House trying to determine exactly what happened. I would echo it as well. No excuses. We're going to get to the bottom of this. We first and foremost, from the Defense Department, want to pass our condolences to the 64 souls and their families that were affected by this. Never should happen. And certainly the 3 service members, the 3 soldiers, a young captain, staff sergeant, and a CW2, chief warrant officer, on a routine annual retraining of night flights on a standard corridor for a continuity of government mission. The military does dangerous things. It does routine things on the regular basis. Tragically, last night, a mistake was made. And I think the president is right. There was some sort of an elevation issue that we have immediately begun investigating at the DOD and Army level. Army CID is on the ground investigating. Top-tier aviation assets inside the DOD are investigating, sir, to get to the bottom of it so that it does not happen again, because it's absolutely unacceptable. But I want to echo what the Transportation Secretary and you, Mr. President, said, because it pertains to the DOD as well. We will have the best and brightest in every position possible. As you said in your inaugural, it is colorblind and merit-based. The best leaders possible, whether it's flying Black Hawks and flying airplanes, leading platoons, or in government. The era of DEI is gone at the Defense Department, and we need the best and brightest, whether it's in our air traffic control, or whether it's in our generals, or whether it's throughout government. So thank you for your leadership and courage on that, sir, and we'll stand by you on it. Thank you.
Very much. JD, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, for your leadership. I just want to reemphasize something the President said, and you've heard from the Secretary of Transportation and of Defense. There really was a whole of government response. We were all on the phone. We were all communicating yesterday, trying to get to the bottom of this immediately, but also try to communicate with the American people about what happened. Something the President said that I think bears reemphasizing, which is that when you don't have the best standards in who you're hiring, it means, on the one hand, you're not getting the best people in government, but on the other hand, it puts stresses on the people who are already there. And I think that is a core part of what President Trump is going to bring and has already brought to Washington, D.C., is we want to hire the best people because we want the best people at air traffic control, and we want to make sure we have enough people at air traffic control who are actually competent to do the job. If you go back to just some of the headlines over the past 10 years, you have many hundreds of people suing the government because they would like to be air traffic controllers, but they were turned away because of the color of their skin. That policy ends under Donald Trump's leadership because safety is the first priority of our aviation industry. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, on DEI and the claims that you've made, are you saying this crash was somehow caused and the result of diversity hiring? And what evidence have you seen to support these claims?
It just could have been. We have a high standard. We've had a much higher standard than anybody else. And there are things where you have to go by brain power. You have to go by psychological quality. And psychological quality is a very important element of it. These are various very powerful tests that we put to use, and they were terminated by Biden. And Biden went by a standard that's the exact opposite. So we don't know, but we do know that you had 2 planes at the same level. You had a helicopter and a plane. That shouldn't have happened. And we'll see. We're going to look into that, and we're going to see. But certainly for an air traffic controller, we want the brightest, the smartest, the sharpest. We want somebody that's psychologically superior, and that's what we're going to have. Yeah.
President.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Mr. President, you mentioned at the top of the briefing that there were several Russian nationals on the flight.
Yes.
Will the U.S. government be willing to facilitate the transfer of their remains, considering the fact there is no direct air travel between the 2 countries?
We've already been in contact with Russia, and the answer is yes, we will facilitate. Yes.
Mr. President.
Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President.
The situation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo is getting worse, even though President John Lorenzo has been mediating the conflict between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of the Congo because he wants to bring peace and stability. The situation is really bad right now. I want to hear from Ms. President if you have any plan in the future to bring peace in the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Well, you're asking me a question about Rwanda, and it is a very serious problem. I agree, but I don't think it's appropriate right now to talk about it. But it is a very serious problem.
We don't even yet know the names of the 67 people who were killed, and you are blaming Democrats and DEI policies and air traffic control and seemingly the member of the U.S. military who was flying that Black Hawk helicopter. Don't you think you're getting ahead of the investigation right now?
No, I don't think so at all. I don't think with the names of the people, you mean the names of the people that are on the plane? You think that's going to make a difference?
Does it comfort their families
They
to
are
hear you
a
blaming
group of
DEI
people that have
policies?
lost their lives. If you want a list of the names, we can give you that. We'll be giving that very soon. We're in coordination with American Airlines. We're in coordination very strongly, obviously, with the military. But I think that's not a very smart question.
But are you
I'm
blaming-
surprised coming from you.
Are you blaming air traffic?
Please.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you, President Trump. Thank you for being here. Based on your analysis so far, do you have a sense of who was at fault, if it was the plane, the helicopter, air traffic control, and can you assure people that it is safe to fly in and out of D.C.?
Well, I've given you the analysis, and the analysis was it was based on vision. You had a lot of people that saw what was happening. You had some people that knew what was happening. There was some warnings, but the warnings were given very, very late. You know, those warnings were given very late. It was almost as they were given. A few seconds later, there was the crash. It should have been brought up earlier. But the people in the helicopter should have seen where they were going. I can't imagine people with 20/20 vision not seeing, you know, what's happening up there. Again, they shouldn't have been at the same height. You're going in reverse directions or sideways directions. Obviously, you want to be at different heights. I see it all the time when I'm flying. You have planes going in the opposite. They're always lower, we're higher, or they're... So if somehow there's a screw up, there's not going to be a tragedy. It'll be close, but you know, there's never going to be a tragedy if you're at a different elevation. For whatever reason, they were at the same elevation. And also, from the American Airlines standard, he's along the track that every plane is along. You say, what was a helicopter doing in that track? It's very sad. But visually, somebody should have been able to see and taken that helicopter out of play, and they should have been at a different height. All right.
Thank you, sir. You mentioned the Russians that were on board that plane. What other nationalities were on board that passenger?
There were a couple of others. We're going to be announcing it in about an hour. We have some very specific information. We're calling the countries. We've spoken to most of them, but there were some other countries represented.
Mr. President, have you spoken to President Putin?
I have not, no.
Mr. President, on your executive order.
Not about this.
On your executive order, you've already issued an executive order you say will restore aviation safety.
Right.
This crash happened after that. Was the executive order successful, and what more needs to change to keep people safe?
Well, you know, we issued it 3 days ago, and we're in the process of making those changes. This is something that should have been done a long time ago. Actually, my original order should have never been changed, and I think maybe you wouldn't have had this problem. Maybe. Yeah, please, go
Yes,
ahead.
thank you. We see like everyday life that very often those diversity hires cause sometimes issues, as you just mentioned. So what plan do you have? Are we going to see some fire? Are you going to fire some of those diversity hire in the federal government? What plan do you have?
I would say the answer is yes. If we find that people aren't mentally competent, you see the language. The language is put out by them. And if you see that, I'm not going to bore you by reading it again, but these are not people that should be doing this particular job. They'd be very good for certain jobs, but not people that should be doing this particular job.
Mr. President, you have today blamed the diversity elements, but then told us that you weren't sure that the controllers made any mistake. You then said perhaps the helicopter pilots were the ones who made the mistake.
It's all under investigation.
I understand that. That's why I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash.
Because I have common sense, okay? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't. We want brilliant people doing this. This is a major chess game at the highest level. When you have 60 planes coming in during a short period of time, and they're all coming in different directions, and you're dealing with very high-level computer work and very complex computers. And one of the other things I will tell you is that the systems that were built, I was going to rebuild the entire system, and then we had an election that didn't turn out the way it should have. But they didn't build the systems properly. They spent a lot of money renovating a system, spending much more money than they would have spent if they bought a new system for air traffic controllers, meaning the computerized systems. There are certain companies that do a very good job. They didn't use those companies. They used companies that should not have been doing it. No, I think it's very important to understand that for some jobs, and not only this, but air traffic controllers, they have to be at the highest level of genius. Okay.
I want to ask you about the ice skaters in a moment because the U.S. Ice Skating Community was affected. But first, if I can, the cited FAA text that you read is real. But the implication that this policy is new or that it stems from efforts that began under President Biden or the Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg is demonstrably false. It's been on the FAA's
Who said
website.
That, you?
No, it's on the website, the FAA's website. It was there in 2013. It was there for the entirety.
What I read.
It was there for the entirety of your administration
Nice and
too.
easy.
So my question is, why didn't you change the policy during your first administration?
I did change it. I changed the Obama policy, and we had a very good policy. And then Biden came in, and he changed it. And then when I came in 3 days ago, I signed a new order, bringing it to the highest level of intelligence. Okay.
It was on the website.
Please. Quiet.
Welcome back to the. I'm sorry. You mentioned that a vision was probably the problem that was at issue in this crash. There's been some reports that one of the pilots in the helicopter may have been using night vision equipment. Was there any indication?
I heard that. We don't know. We're going to know that pretty soon. It may change your view plane if you do have the night vision. So it's very possible that could have happened. That would be maybe a reason why you wouldn't actually see as well as on a clear night. You can see sometimes better without it. Had a couple of more.
Mr. President, is it helpful to have your Secretary of Transportation confirmed, and does this intensify your interest in getting other nominees confirmed quickly?
Go to what?
Is it helpful to have your Secretary of Transportation confirmed, and does this intensify your interest in getting other nominees confirmed quickly as well?
Well, sure. We want fast confirmations, and the Democrats, as you know, are doing everything they can to delay them. They've taken too long. We're struggling to get very good people that everybody knows are going to be confirmed, but we're struggling to get them out faster. We want them out faster. It's a good question, actually. We've been pushing Sean. Everyone knows Sean for a long time. He got many, many Democrat votes, but they want to take as long as they can. They ask questions like some of the questions that Peter would ask that were totally irrelevant and not very good questions, but they want to just keep it going. They want to keep it going as long as possible. I was very honored, actually, that you got so many Democrat votes. That was really good. That was really good.
When I try to meet with the families, and second question, is it your impression that military training that was done during that time?
The what?
The training that the helicopter was involved in. Is it anything you can tell us about
You
that?
don't know. These are the things that will come up with the investigation. You don't know. But the helicopter obviously was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and a tragedy occurred. Please.
I've got a question about the.
No, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. You've been critical of the current regulations, and you've called for big reforms at FAA. I'm curious, sir,
I made the reforms, actually.
What is your message?
3 days ago, I made them.
Yes, sir. What is your message then to the American public in the weeks and months ahead? Should they feel hesitant to fly? And if you could clarify perhaps something that the Defense Secretary said when he said that this helicopter was on a continuity of government mission?
I don't know what that refers to, but they were practicing. They do that. They call it practicing, and they were. And that's something that should be done. It's only continuity in the sense that we want to have very good people, and that has to be in continuity, and that's what they refer to. But it was basically practice, and it was a practice that worked out very, very badly. Okay?
first question. Should people be hesitant to fly right now?
No, not at all. I've not hesitated to fly. This is something that it's been many years that something like this has happened. And the collision is just something that we don't expect ever to happen again. We are going to have the highest level people. We've already hired some of the people that you've already hired for that position long before we knew about this. I mean, long before. From the time I came in, we started going out and getting the best people because I said it's not appropriate what they're doing. I think it's a tremendous mistake. You know, they like to do things and they like to take them too far, and this is sometimes what ends up happening. Now, with that, I'm not blaming the controller. I'm saying there are things that you could question, like the height of the helicopter, the height of the plane being at the same level and going in opposite directions. It's not a positive. But no, we're already hiring people. No, flying is very safe. We have the safest flying anywhere in the world, and we'll keep it that way. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much.
And back to the hearings. President Trump's nominee to lead the FBI, Kash Patel, is now testifying at his Senate confirmation. Let's tune in.
Mr. Patel, as part of my responsibility as a member of this committee, I asked the following two initial questions of all nominees before any of my committees. Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, Senator, I have not.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement relating to this kind of conduct?
No, Senator, I have not.
Mr. Patel, you have been a champion of the January 6th prison choir. You have stated that the choir's members were, quote, incarcerated as a result of their involvement in the January 6, 2021 protest for election integrity, end quote. And one of the choir members is Julian Cater, who pled guilty. He pled guilty to assaulting officers with a deadly weapon. On January 6th, he attacked Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick with pepper spray, and the next day, Officer Sicknick suffered from 2 strokes and died. Mr. Patel, was Mr. Cater protesting for election integrity? Yes or no?
I don't know who that is.
I'm not asking you who that is. I'm asking you whether, having heard the description of what he pled to, whether he was protesting for election integrity, yes or no?
I don't know who that is.
That is not responsive to my question. You're not willing to say that, but you were willing to describe this choir as consisting of people who were protesting for election integrity, and yet you testify you don't know them. We have heard already your book includes a list of 60 people who you think make up part of the executive branch deep state. Mr. Patel, if confirmed, do you plan to investigate President Trump's former FBI Director Christopher Wray? Yes or no?
I have no plans in going backwards. I have plans in safeguarding.
How about James Comey? Do you plan to investigate him?
Senator, every investigation will be subject to the same legal standard.
Do you plan to investigate James Comey, who's on your list?
I have no intentions of going backwards.
How about
and
Bill
every
Barr?
intention of using the Constitution.
How about Bill Barr? Do you plan to investigate him, who's on your executive branch deep state, and you say you're going to ferret out the deep state?
No one
Yes or
that
no?
did not break the law will be investigated.
No answers to any of those. Okay. Over 1 million Americans died as a result of COVID-19. The COVID-19 vaccine saved lives, yet less than a year ago, you promoted unregulated, unproven, unscientific supplements to reverse the effects of the vaccine on Truth Social. You told your followers that these supplements would detox them of the COVID-19 vaccine. Mr. Patel, did you make money by promoting these supplements?
Senator, do you know of any individuals who died as a result of complications from the vaccine?
Again,
Because I do.
Are you unable to answer my question, which is a straightforward, did you make money by promoting these supplements?
All of my financial disclosures have been made to this committee.
I would like to hear your answer, yes or no. Did you make money?
I don't have those financial disclosures.
This is my third and last time I'm going to ask you
in front
that
of me.
question.
You have that information.
So you refuse to answer the question.
I answered 1,300
Here
pages.
you no answer, and yet you spread dangerous misinformation. Mr. Patel, the FBI is the primary agency responsible for investigating election-related crimes, including fraud and the denial of voting rights. So being able to separate fact from conspiracy theories around elections is an important thing for the FBI director. I have a question to see if you can do that. Mr. Patel, did Donald Trump lose the 2020 presidential election? Yes or no?
President Biden's election was certified. He was sworn in and he served as the president of the United States.
Once again, the people who are 100% loyal to President Trump cannot answer that question. It is alarming that you want to be an FBI director who can't answer a simple question, factual question. During a 2023 interview with Steve Bannon, you said, quote, "We will go out and find the conspirators, not just in government, but in the media. Yes, we're going to come after the people in the media who lied about the American citizens, who helped Joe Biden rig presidential elections." There's your quote. Do you still plan to come after the free press?
Not unless private citizens have been defamed. That's their right.
You said that you would be going after the media. So I want to know whether you plan to do that, go after the free media.
I can't go after the media for other people. That's a decision they have.
So I would say that that was a statement that you made that is pretty chilling to the free media. So I didn't hear a no that you would not go after them. You currently serve on the board of directors for the Trump Media Technology Group, which owns the social media platform Truth Social. If confirmed as FBI director, will you resign from this position and end all ties with the Trump Media and Technology Group?
Yes, Senator, as I've stated to you in writing.
Over the last 2 years, the FBI has dedicated resources to Operation Not Forgotten, which works to address violent crime in Indian country. Mm-hmm. If confirmed as FBI director, would you continue the important work of Operation Not Forgotten?
I've made that commitment to many of your colleagues who have tribal issues and tribal crimes plaguing their communities, and I'll make that commitment to you as well, Senator.
My time is almost up, but I would like to note that on the many questions asked about the choir, the J6 choir, it included at least 5 men who pled guilty to assaulting police officers. And these are the people whose record this nominee promotes. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to Senator Kennedy next, and then as directed by the chairman, we will take a 30-minute recess at the conclusion of Senator Kennedy's questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say for the record that Chairman Grassley is the greatest chairman God ever put breath in. And would somebody please tell Grassley I said that? You've made a lot of people mad, haven't you, Mr. Patel?
Seems so, Senator.
Think maybe you've made the right people mad?
As my FBI agents, the BRIC agents told me when I was running cases with them across this country and around the world, if you're not ticking off some people, you're not doing your job right.
My colleague and friend, Senator Durbin, called you a conspiracy theorist. You remember that?
I do, Senator.
And officials are saying no survivors are expected after a passenger plane and an Army helicopter collided over the nation's capital. Joining us now live with the latest is our Washington reporter, Luis Martinez. He's at the site of the plane crash. Luis, what do we know so far?
Well, the latest that I can report is that right here, and you can see it behind me, it's the DCA Reagan International Airport. As of 11:12 a.m., so that's about 50 minutes ago, the first flights started landing and taking off from the airport after it was shut down last night. And we know that last night, right before 9 p.m., a commercial flight, a American Airlines flight flying from Wichita to Reagan International Airport collided mid-air with a U.S. Army helicopter, a Black Hawk helicopter that was flying a training mission. It was a nighttime proficiency training mission, and according to the Department of Defense, these were pilots with enough experience, as well as according to the American Airlines CEO, the pilots in the plane that crashed, 5432, had hours of experience. So this has no indication it had to do with pilot error as of now. And as I mentioned, the flight's already taking off from the airport and landing in, so it was a brief shutdown. We also know that this is no longer a rescue operation. It's a recovery operation as of early this morning. So all 60 passengers and 4 crew members of the American Airlines flight are expected to have passed away, as well as the 3 people on board the U.S. Army helicopter. Back to you.
And Luis, if you could update us on the latest of what authorities are saying as well.
Of course. Well, as I mentioned, no longer a rescue operation. This is a recovery operation. Also, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser has relinquished the authority of the operation to the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, that is now in charge of the recovery, and of course also investigated what happened. Let's listen to what Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy, who has only 2 days in the job, he was confirmed earlier this week, had to say about the crash late last night.
So the question is, can I guarantee the American flying public that the United States has the most safe and secure airspace in the world? And the answer to that is absolutely, yes, we do. We have early indicators of what happened here, and I will tell you with complete confidence, we have the safest airspace in the world.
So as I mentioned, the NTSB is taking over the recovery operation and starting an investigation, but also the Secretary of Defense, Peter Hegseth, who has more than over a week in the job, also announced that the U.S. military will conduct its own investigation. Let's listen to what he had to say.
It was a fairly experienced crew, and it was doing a required annual night evaluation. They did have night vision goggles. The 12th Aviation Battalion, as of now, is granted a 48-hour operational pause on contingency missions as what happened is reviewed, and a senior-level aviation team, an investigative team from our Aviation Safety Center, was deployed last night and already is in Washington, D.C. to investigate what's going on.
The main takeaways from what we've heard from authorities thus far is that this accident was, according to the Trump administration, preventable. But at the same time, the Trump administration is and has been repeatedly telling the public that it is safe to fly. It's safe to fly out of DCA, and that the United States still has the safest airspace in the world. The last time that an incident like this happened was back in 2001, a couple of months after 9/11. It was also an American Airlines flight in New York. So again, the Trump administration and authorities reinforcing to the public that it is safe to fly. And as I mentioned, we're seeing the planes take off and land at DCA. Back to you.
All right, appreciate the updates, Luis. Thank you very much.
Say goodbye to harsh, bitter coffee and hello to a delicious, smooth brew. With specialty quality beans, expertly roasted in-house, you'll taste the difference with every sip. Fermented with a blend of 50 enzymes, Dave's coffee delivers a rich brew like no other. Made with the highest grade specialty beans available, you're sure to taste the difference. Elevate your morning with Dave's enzyme fermented coffee.
If you need to do something to feel okay to drive, you're not okay to drive. Don't drive buzzed.
What if you could whiten your teeth by simply brushing your teeth? Now you can with Smile Actives, the teeth whitening breakthrough that safely gets your teeth white and keeps them white every day, just by brushing your teeth.
I never thought that whitening my teeth could be so easy. I just put the gel on the brush, the toothpaste on it, brush, and I can see my white teeth.
Simply add Smile Actives to any toothpaste and our patented PolyClean technology activates into a powerful microfoam that penetrates into the enamel surface to safely lift and remove stains.
You need a simple way to whiten your teeth. Without strips, without trays, without going to the dentist. And it was about time that a product was developed that you would be able to do that with just brushing.
And now, Smile Actives is even better with new Pro Whitening Gel with 33% greater whitening power, clinically shown to whiten teeth faster, up to 8 shades. 100% of users saw whiter teeth. On food stains, coffee and wine stains, even on veneers, crowns, and dentures.
I eat the blueberries, I drink the coffee, and I know that Smile Actives will keep my teeth white every day.
If you could use something so easy like Smile Actives to take yellow teeth to white teeth, why wouldn't you?
Why spend hundreds of dollars for whitening treatments at the dentist when now you can whiten your teeth with new Smile Actives Pro Whitening Gel every time you brush your teeth? Call or go to smileactives.com and for a limited time get new Pro Whitening Gel for just $24.95. Order in the next 5 minutes and buy one get one absolutely free for just $24.95. That's 2 for 1 and save 58%. We'll even include free shipping. Get your teeth whiter guaranteed or return it within 60 days for your money back.
I smile every day now.
The difference is literally night and day.
So now I'm always smiling, always choosing, because now my teeth are much whiter.
This offer is not available in stores, so call or click now before the special buy one get one free offer goes away.
Joining us now with more on the Midair collision is Iris Tao, our White House correspondent. Iris, please give us an update.
Sure, good afternoon to you, Don. So today, President Trump actually held his first briefing inside that briefing room right behind us. And this is about the latest crash between the helicopter and the American Airlines flight. And he started by holding a moment of silence for everyone, of course, mourn for the loss of lives. He also confirmed that there's right now no survivor from the incident. He also updated saying that the operations ongoing right now in the Potomac River has been pivoted into recovery focus instead of course, rescuing operation. And of course, the biggest question now in a lot of Americans' mind is what really went wrong and what caused it. And on that front, President Trump did not give a very explicit answer just yet, as investigations are still ongoing, but he blamed it on, quote, a confluence of bad decisions that were made. And Trump says he's not blaming the air traffic controllers, but there are, quote, things that you can question. Specifically, he pointed to what he calls the DEI hiring practice inside the FAA. For example, he said that there was, quote, FAA diversity push, including a focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. And he said that a week before he entered office this time around, they, quote, put a big push to put diversity into the FAA program. Meanwhile, he also pointed to the previous administrations, including the Biden and Obama administration, where he said that they reversed his practices of putting the best talents in those key positions. He emphasized that there needs to be what he calls the naturally talented geniuses doing those jobs. But when asked about if there's any evidence that he has seen directly pointing to a causal link between the DEI hiring practice and what happened last night, Trump said, quote, it just could have been. Meanwhile, Trump also pointed to other factors. For example, he questioned what was going on inside that helicopter. He said that for some reason it was pretty much going at the same height and going at an angle, quote, that was unbelievably bad. And President Trump also pointed to the conditions during the incident in which he highlighted that it was a very clear night. They should have clear vision, and that the American Airlines plane actually had their lights on while descending, and that it should have been actually quite visible to the pilots inside the helicopter. But he also mentioned that wearing night goggles for the pilots inside the helicopter could have made it more difficult for them to see in a clear night situation. Of course, no word on if that is actually a factor just yet, but that we have heard on the defense secretary that yes, they were using night goggles inside the helicopter. And of course, when it comes to if this current situation would lead to anxiety and fear about flying, of course, a lot of Americans are questioning if it's still safe to fly at the current moment. And President Trump answering that question by one reporter saying that no, Americans should not feel hesitant to fly, and then they will make sure to get to the bottom of this, to investigate and put in necessary measures. Don.
And Iris, as I understand it, key officials handling the situation were also in that briefing room. Tell us more about what they said.
Sure. So inside that briefing room just now were also Vice President J.D. Vance, as well as Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who was just sworn in earlier this week, as well as Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, who was just sworn in literally a day ago. And Duffy said that this should not have happened, and adding that they will not accept excuses and will not pass the buck. Hegseth saying that they will get to the bottom of this, and also pointing out that, of course, it was during a routine annual training when this happened, adding that the on-the-ground investigations is going into what exactly happened, and of course to prevent further incidents like this. And of course they also emphasized and re-echoed President Trump's point that they have to have the best and the brightest, and the hiring practice inside the DoD, and of course these key departments needs to be, quote, colorblind and merit-based. And Senator, of course, now Vice President J.D. Vance also echoing President Trump's message, saying that it's now a whole of government response to what's happening, and that re-emphasizing that when you don't have the best hiring standards, it also puts stress on people who are already there. Back to you.
And I think it's worth it to talk a bit more about safety, because given the situation, you mentioned this earlier, should Americans feel safe to fly?
So as of now, DCA or Reagan Airport here in DC has already resumed its flights at about 11 a.m. this morning. And that's, of course, after all flights were grounded and no flight was going out or descending into the airport after the incident last night. And while, of course, there were questions about, you see, President Trump wanted to change the hiring practice through his executive orders and potentially mentioning the possibility today at the briefing about firing people already in their position if they're not meeting the required standards. But those things will take time, unfortunately. And right now, the message, the questioning about the DEI practices, as well as the current staffing standards in these key departments could make some Americans hesitant to fly. But President Trump today trying to quell those concerns, saying that it's okay because it's a very rare incident. Back to you.
Okay, Iris, thank you very much. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Trump's choice to be Secretary of Health and Human Services, faces his second confirmation hearing today. He is now sitting before the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee. Watch.
This area, we're able to perhaps pull back a little bit on that. But our reality is, in order to make this country healthy again, it is a focus on everything. It is the prevention. It is the necessity of coming up with these life-saving vaccines that are going to be so critically important. It is personal care. It is food. It is exercise. It is all of the above. And we got to figure it out together. We do need to shake some things up, but we also need to give a level of confidence. And this is what I'm hearing from so many of my colleagues who have raised the issue of vaccines. We have made some considerable gains in my state of Alaska with vaccinating the many people in very rural areas where one disease outbreak can wipe out an entire village. We saw this in 1918 with the Spanish flu, and that's why everyone was rattled to the core. Villages were shut down entirely entirely during COVID because of the fear of transmission. And so they're looking for these life-saving ways and means. And so when there is a lack of confidence, when there is a doubt, it's like, well, what do I do? And so we're pulling back then on, again, these areas where we can work to prevent some of these deadly diseases that we thought we had wiped out years ago. We have dramatically reduced diseases in my state like Hep A and B and meningitis. We're just now getting through a tough bout of whooping cough that came around to the state. Now there's a scare in the peninsula in Alaska about a measles outbreak. So we can't be going backwards with our vaccinations that will allow for this level of prevention and protection. So I'm asking you, you are clearly an influencer. You are clearly an influencer. You would not be in this position today. But you can see how your podium, your platform, your voice can influence so many. So I am asking you on the issue of vaccines specifically to please convey with a level of authority and science, but also with a level of conviction and free of conflict and free of political bias, that these are measures that we should be proud of as a country. Proud of as a country. Look to what President Trump was able to do with the COVID vaccine. It was extraordinary, and it did save lives. I need time for a question, so I'm asking you to focus on how you can use your position to provide for greater levels of confidence to the public when it comes to these life-saving areas. So I'm going to pivot to a question that you can answer. This relates...
I can answer that one, too.
No, I know, but I have 43 seconds, and no one has talked about our Native populations. When you look at our health statistics, whether it's Alaska Natives or whether it is American Indians, our health statistics in this country, you know very well, because we talked about them, are not where they need to be. And it's in all categories. It's infectious disease, it's tuberculosis, it's Hep C, it's mental health, it's depression, it's substance use, it's sexually transmitted diseases, it's hypertension, stroke. It is so deep, and it is so challenging, and it is so hard. You have received support from Native American tribes. You have been in these areas. You have been quoted, and I'd like for your comment on this, as quoted saying, as far as budgeting for Indian country, you said you would immediately triple the budget to support tribes. Can you expand on this pledge and the commitment? Because this is an area where we have truly left our Native people behind when it comes to their health and their health outcomes.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. And, you know, this is an issue, as you and I talked about, that is very important. It's always been a priority for me. I spent 20% of my career working on Native issues. I was one of the founding editors of Indian Country Today, which is the biggest Indian newspaper. My father and uncle, Ted Kennedy, my father, were deeply, deeply critical of the functioning of the Indian Health Service back in 1968 to 1980, and nothing's changed. Nothing's gotten better. I'm going to bring in a Native at the Assistant Secretary level. I'd like to get him actually designated as a Assistant Secretary for the first time in American history. Make sure that all of the decisions that we make in our agency are conscious of their impacts on the First Nations. I've spent a lot of time in your state. It's my favorite place to go. I've been up with the Gwich'in, representing the Gwich'in people up in Arctic Village, and been all over the state in the remote areas. I understand in Alaska, unique needs of Alaska because of remote healthcare, because some of these areas are not even accessible except for airplane. If they don't have ambulance services, that the federal government needs to pay attention to financing transportation, the unusual ways that are required there. and that we really need to focus on telemedicine and AI, make sure that even in remote places in Alaska, that Native people can get high-quality health care, and we can do that today. And I look forward to working with you on those issues and others.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Murkowski sets the record for going over. Senator also Brooks.
Sorry.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Kennedy, I was struck by your comments during our meeting last week.
What?
I was struck by your comments in our meeting last week where you made it abundantly clear to me that you intended to clean house of the professional scientist at the National Institutes of Health, which you know is headquartered in the state of Maryland and employs thousands of hardworking Marylanders. I, for the record, believe in scientists and I believe in doctors and I trust them over politicians without medical degrees. You talked about bad science and bad scientists, and in fact, you specifically said to me in response to my question that you intend to replace the bad scientist with the good scientist. And so I want to ask you, in your opinion, what makes a scientist or a doctor qualified to serve at the National Institutes of Health?
A scientist who's devoted to empirical methodology, to evidence-based science, scientists who understand the importance of replication, the importance of publishing raw data and being open and transparent about it, the importance of publishing peer review. We have, NIH has overseen over the past several years the precipitous decline in American health. There's 91,000 people at HHS. And are you suggesting that some of them should not be held responsible for that decline? They were in charge of protecting our health.
Let me just insert here.
Let me just finish.
But let me just say this, because I only have 3 minutes left. I don't set the rules here, but I ask the questions. And the question is really whether you intend, as you said, to substitute essentially your judgment for the judgment of these professional scientists. And
I'm not going to substitute my judgment for science. Of course, I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do, listen, the New York Times just did an article last week talking about the fraud, the 20-year fraud, 800 fraudulent studies produced by NIH on amyloid plaques and not allowing any other hypothesis about the cause of Alzheimer's.
Well, how will you decide, Mr. Kennedy, which scientists are bad scientists? Are they the ones who disagree with you?
The ones who are corrupt, the ones who have been doing science like the amyloid plaque studies that were fraudulent.
These doctors, let me ask you a question. Do you have a medical degree?
Do I know?
Okay, let me go to the next question. The Heritage Fund has compiled a watch list of federal employees to go after federal staff. Is there a watch list for federal staff at HHS?
Not that I know of.
Have you or has anyone in the administration developed a list of career scientists or federal staff that you would target for termination?
Not that I know of.
And let me just ask you another question. Now, your failed presidential campaign has been raising money to try and cover your debts. And you were questioned about this yesterday and failed to answer a question that Senator Warren asked you. And so I want to ask you again regarding these emails that you have sent to raise money. How much has your presidential campaign made fundraising off of this administration's complete disregard for the workforce at HHS?
Excuse me? I didn't hear the question. The last part.
How much money has your presidential campaign made off of fundraising, off of this administration's complete disregard for the workforce at HHS?
Zero.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record 2 emails from this week and the week before regarding fundraising that you are currently doing through your presidential campaign.
Without objection.
And finally, I want to ask you, I have you said you were on a show on February 26, 2021, an interview with Dr. Judy Mikovits, where you said the following, and I quote, "We should not be giving Black people the same vaccine schedule that's given to whites because their immune system is better than ours." Can you please explain what you meant?
There's a series of studies, I think most of them by Poland, that show that to particular antigens that blacks have a much stronger reaction. There's differences in reaction to different products by different races.
So I have 17 seconds left. Let me just ask you then. So what different vaccine schedule would you say I should have received? What different vaccine schedule should I have received?
I mean, the pollen article suggests that blacks need fewer antigens than...
This is so dangerous.
So you get the same measles vaccine.
Mr. Kennedy, with all due respect, that is so dangerous. Your voice would be a voice that parents would listen to. That is so dangerous. I will be voting against your nomination because your views are dangerous to our state and to our country.
I mean, do you think science is dangerous, Senator? This is published, peer-reviewed studies.
I yield.
Senator Collins, who would have been here the whole time, but she was in an Intel committee. So, Senator Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kennedy, welcome, first of all. I agree with you that there needs to be more focus on chronic diseases like diabetes, like Alzheimer's. But it concerns me when I read a quote from you that says, I'm going to say to NIH scientists, God bless you all. Thank you for your public service. We're going to give infectious diseases a break for about 8 years. Don't we need to do both?
Yes, absolutely, Senator. The problem is there's been an imbalance. We've devoted all of these dollars to infectious disease and to drug development to make NIH an incubator for the pharmaceutical industry and very little to chronic disease. But chronic disease is 92% of deaths in our country. It's 9 out of every $10 we spend on our budget. Why aren't we devoting at least equivalent studies to determining the etiology of our chronic disease? It just seems like common sense to me.
I would point out that in many cases it's Congress rather than HHS who sets the funding levels for various diseases.
But NIH decides, has panels that decide who gets funding, not Congress, Senator.
I want to share with you a discussion that I had with a Maine pediatric nurse practitioner. She raised the concern that if people are discouraged from getting their children vaccinated, we will lose the herd immunity in a classroom. And that means that a child who may be immunosuppressed and cannot get a vaccine are at risk of being in a classroom with an unvaccinated child, and thus at risk of getting the infectious disease because we've lost the herd immunity. What would be your response to that?
My response is that vaccine uptake for the COVID vaccine, for example, is down to 23%. And all vaccines are dropping, and they're doing that because people don't believe the government anymore. We need good science, and I'm going to bring that in. I'm going to restore trust, and that will restore vaccine uptake.
Well, you're certainly correct about what happened with the COVID vaccine, but let me switch to the polio vaccine. Do you think that the polio vaccine is safe and effective?
Yes, I do.
And so would you seek to reduce its availability in any way?
No, not at all.
The state of Maine has seen a steady and disturbing increase in Lyme disease cases over the past decade. We talked a little bit about this in my office. In 2023, Maine had a record number of Lyme disease cases, nearly 3,000 reported cases. Fortunately, there is a promising vaccine trial for Lyme disease that is underway at Maine Health in Portland. Access to a Lyme disease would be a monumental step forward in reducing the burden of this disease, which can have lifelong effects. I've seen it in members of my own family. As HHS Secretary, if confirmed, what influence would you exercise over new vaccine approvals, such as one for Lyme disease?
Senator, you and I have talked about this issue. I've had Lyme disease. I lived in the epicenter of Lyme disease. Every member of my family my immediate family has had Lyme disease. I had a son whose face was paralyzed for a year. I have a son today who has been suffering with devastating effects from Lyme disease for 2 years. There's nobody who will fight harder to find a vaccine or a treatment for Lyme disease than me.
I very much appreciate that assurance, and I'm sorry that your own family has been so adversely affected. In Maine, we have a lot of people who work outside and work in the woods, and ticks are everywhere. So this is a very important issue to me. Thank you.
And to me too, Senator.
Let me, we're almost to the end. Let me acknowledge Senator Moody has also been here the whole time. And so thank you, Senator Moody. Yeah, well, just incredible diligence. Thank you. Both Senator Sanders and I will have a couple questions, and then we'll each have a closing statement, and then your long national nightmare will be over. So anyway, first, a couple more of commit-type questions. If you are confirmed, do you commit that you will not work to impound, divert, or otherwise reduce any funding appropriated by Congress for the purpose of vaccination programs?
Yes.
And do you commit that you will not impose new grant conditions outside of congressional direction for state, local, or global entities that in any way limits, restricts, or rescinds access to vaccines or vaccine promotion programs?
Yes.
And then this is the nice thing about listening to all of this. Let me ask this. I've been impressed. One, you've handled yourself very well. I've been impressed that on many things you are familiar with recent medical data. But on other things, you haven't been. So let me bring up two things that are very pertinent now. While sitting here, I went up to look at the medical literature on these issues. And here's a title, Why Parents Say No to Having Their Children Vaccinated Against Measles, a systemic review of the social determinants of parental perceptions on MMR vaccine hesitancy. And they found that fear of autism is a major driver for vaccine hesitancy among those with a college education or higher, influenced by internet social media narratives over physician-based vaccine information. I'll go back to something I said earlier. You got to follow it, man. There's a lot of people that look to you for, do I get vaccinated or not? People that I kind of know. But here it says it's not just my anecdote, it's actually out there. But when I raised, and you said, well, if I show you the data, you'll change your, because I asked, will you unequivocally, without qualification, say that measles vaccine does not cause autism? And you said, if I show you the data.
I will publicly apologize.
So here's
and say that I was wrong.
Here's a meta-analysis from 2014, and you quoted Cochrane on several occasions, which for the people watching is a meta-analysis. A meta meaning they look at everything and then they come to a conclusion based upon as much facts as they can get. And here is such a study, and the title tells it all. Vaccines are not associated with autism, an evidence-based meta-analysis of case control and cohort studies, and they ended up looking at 5 cohort studies with roughly 1.2 million children. Now, this is from 2014, and it has a whole bunch of articles it references. And then I got a text from a former employee of the NIH, I emphasize the former, who says that in early in the President Trump's term, you and colleagues sent 90 papers for review by people at NIH. They felt like the NIH folks felt that without exception, they were severely lacking methodologically, and found that they indeed showed the safety of these vaccines. We tried to engage Mr. Kennedy, but his colleagues refused to acknowledge the expertise of dozens of NIH scientists we made about those papers. Now, you're a smart guy. You're reading the medical literature, and you're coming up with the recent medical literature on certain issues. But here is both older article, summarizing lots of older articles that have come out since the original refuted Wakefield article in The Lancet regarding measles and autism. And here is somebody who, you know, it's he said, but somebody who said that previously you've had this presented to you. So back to me. I'm a doc trying to understand. Convince me that you will become the public health advocate, but not just churn old information so that there's never a conclusion, as Senator Hassan suggested, but that will become the influencer for people to believe, no, there's 1.25 million kids studied and there's no autism associated with measles. You tell me, you see what my question is in there.
Senator, I'm going to be an advocate for strong science. You show me those scientific studies, and you and I can meet about it. And there are other studies as well, and I'd love to show those to you. There's a study that came out last week of 47,000 9-year-olds in the Medicaid system in Florida. I think a Louisiana scientist called Mawson that shows the opposite. So there are other studies out there. I just want to follow the science. And I will do, if the science says that I am wrong about what I've said in the past, as I said, I will publicly apologize. There's many times I've been wrong about science. If you look at my Instagram account, when I'm wrong, I apologize for it. And I say I was wrong. I don't have any problem. Science is a process of challenging hypotheses with new evidence. And scientists have to be able to admit when they're wrong. Epidemiological studies, the Institute of Medicine has said repeatedly in 2013, 2017, when they investigated this, has asked CDC to do certain studies, animal studies, bench studies, observational studies, studies of the vaccine safety data link. CDC has not done that. Oh, I want them to do that, and I want the best science. I can guarantee you, on my word of honor, that if you show me science that says that I'm wrong, I'm going to say I was wrong. I don't have any problem. There's nothing that would make me happier. We need to be able to look at the science and get IOM involved, the National Academy of Sciences. They're the ultimate arbiter of safety.
What was that?
And one of the things we need to do, I think, is a subject that we haven't talked about here. Why don't we know what's causing this epidemic? Why hasn't the CDC been looking at other hypotheses to determine the etiology of why we've had this dramatic 1,000% increase in this disease that is destroying our kids? Is probably the biggest issue. Why don't we know the answer after 30 years of steady rises in autism rates? Why don't we know the answer to that? We should know the answer.
What was that? What was that last article? Did you mention
that article? Is by Mawson, M-A-W-S-O-N.
And it's regarding measles and what?
No, it looks at the entire schedule, and it says it's a study of 9-year-old boys, 47,000 9-year-old boys from the Florida healthcare data.
Okay, let me, Senator Sanders.
Thank you. And I find myself in the unusual and uncomfortable position of having to agree with Senator Cassidy's line of questioning. Mr. Kennedy, in an interview in July 2023, you stated, quote, "I do believe autism does come from vaccines." And you have, the end of quote, and you have praised a gentleman named Andrew Wakefield for his research. What studies, you talk about the need to be science-based, to get our information, good information to make decisions. What studies have you utilized to come to the conclusion that vaccines cause autism?
I'm happy to sit down with you.
No, please, just answer.
What's happened to this world we're living in? Why?
For the 4 years he has been on this earth, he has known nothing but war.
Wherever I go, the things I see, I just want to turn away. The dreams I have, the stories I could tell, will they still be possible? This year, more than ever, I need a brand new world, a clean world. Where I can improve myself and be inspired. My stage can be anywhere and everywhere. But it begins here.
President Trump's nominee to lead the FBI, Kash Patel, is now testifying at his Senate confirmation hearing. Let's tune into that.
My constitutional rights during that process with the advice and consent of counsel and appeared before that grand jury.
I will take that as a yes. And you are familiar, I imagine, with Section 6002 of Title 18.
Off the top of my head, Senator, not...
Well, Section 6002 is the immunity statute. Whenever a witness refuses to testify or provide other information before a grand jury based upon the privilege against self-incrimination, the court can order the witness to testify. The witness must comply with the order, but they receive immunity, which means that no testimony or any other information provided before the grand jury can be used against them in any criminal proceeding. You were compelled to testify as a witness in the Mar-a-Lago classified document case. Did you participate in any criminal conduct involved in that case?
Involved in which, the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case?
Yes.
No, I testified through compulsion by court order.
You received immunity for providing information that was self-incriminating. Do you remember the name of the prosecutor who questioned you?
There were multiple, Senator. I do not.
Was it one of the people, were any of them people that were fired this past week?
I have no idea, Senator.
Are you certain? You're under oath.
I'm aware that I'm under oath, Senator, and I have no idea, and I did not participate in the removal of any DOJ prosecutors.
What was the information you provided that you received immunity for?
Senator, I would love my grand jury testimony to be released, but as you know, that grand jury testimony has been sealed by the Department of Justice, and I'm not allowed to discuss it here.
Well, I find it troubling that you do not know the law here, and let me tell you what the law is. Rule 6 governs grand jury proceedings. Under Rule 6E, grand jurors, court reporters, and prosecutors are bound to secrecy. But witnesses are not bound by secrecy. You were a witness in the classified documents case. You are not bound by secrecy. You can tell us everything that happened in that room and everything you testified about. I'll ask you again, what information did you provide to the grand jury?
In this, we are in agreement, Senator. Get my grand jury testimony. I want it made public. I asked the Department of Justice to make it public, and they refused to do so.
There is no legal bound against you telling us right now what you testified to.
When I asked for my transcript to be released, the
Sir,
Department
did
of
you or did you
Justice-
not commit a crime?
Senator, I did not commit a crime.
Then why won't you tell us what you testified to?
Because it occurred over the course of 3 weeks. I don't have the ability to recall everything I testified to, but I'm asking you to put my
Did you testify
transcript
to
out.
witnessing the President of the United States declassifying documents?
Senator, what I testified to is best captured by that transcript
So
in real
you're
time.
not willing to tell Congress, after making many pledges today about transparency, whether or not you testified to witnessing the President of the United States declassify documents. In the name of all the values you have said today, did you or did you not testify to witnessing the President of the United States declassify documents?
I testified accordingly and under oath, and I encourage you to get that transcript.
And by the law of our land, you are free to tell people, what are you hiding from Congress? Answer the question. Did you testify to witnessing the President of the United States declassifying documents, yes or no?
Senator, the grand jury testimony is available to you. I encourage you to make it public.
As you likely know, the second volume of Jack Smith's report about the classified document case is not public yet. To fulfill our constitutional duty of advice and consent, the President, on nominations, members of this committee have asked the DOJ to review the report. Do you agree that Congress should thoroughly review its nominees? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Now, last question and I'll be done. When you and I met, you told me that you wanted to remove 11,000 FBI personnel or move many of them, and you said that again today. You have looked at an org chart to understand what offices and functions that you'll be pulling from. I don't think you've done a serious analysis, but I do think you have an assignment from Donald Trump to gut the FBI. You said yourself, I'll shut down the FBI Hoover building. There are people specifically that you are targeting, I believe, and do you agree that you have already prepared plans to remove certain individuals from their offices? For example, individuals that will be replaced by political personnel. The political personnel that are being put in an institution that you and I discussed that has no political appointees but one, the political personnel involve these names: Erica Knight, Tom Ferguson, Greg Bitzner.
You stated your question. Would you answer? Or don't you want to? Okay.
We can move on.
Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Patel, there is absolutely no doubt that you have the experience and the expertise to lead the FBI, and we welcome you here today. We are pleased that you are here. I've been listening to my colleagues across the dais and listening to their questions, and it has led me to one thing. Why are the Democrats so afraid of you?
I don't know, Senator. You'd have to ask them.
Well, I tell you what I think, and listening to their questions and your responses, which we appreciate, they know that you're going to go in and you're going to clean up that political cabal that has been over there for years. You are going to reposition the FBI to its core mission. You stated that earlier in this hearing, and there will be no more political persecutions and no more two tiers of justice, and they have liked having two tiers of justice. They have enjoyed it, and it has helped them. They think in their political mission, they've enjoyed targeting Catholics. They've enjoyed targeting parents. But the American people have said they want no more of that. And our colleagues know you're going to clean it up. I want to talk to you about the Epstein case. I have worked on this for years, trying to get those records of who flew on Epstein's plane and who helped him build this international human trafficking, sex trafficking ring. Now, earlier I urged then Chairman Durbin to subpoena those records, and I ended up being blocked by Senator Durbin and Christopher Wray. They stonewalled on this. And I know that breaking up these trafficking rings is important to President Trump. So will you work with me on this issue so we know who worked with Jeffrey Epstein in building these sex trafficking rings?
Absolutely, Senator. Child sex trafficking has no place in the United States of America, and I will do everything, if confirmed as FBI director, to make sure the American public knows the full weight of what happened in the past and how we are going to countermand missing children and exploited children going forward.
Thank you for that. I do want to touch on the political persecution. I find it so interesting that they feel like you would carry out political persecution. Your parents are with us today. They fled Uganda and persecution from Idi Amin. And I think that with your background and given your family's history, that you would never move to political persecution. Is that accurate?
Yes, Senator, that is.
And we appreciate that you would remove any kind of 2 tiers of justice from the FBI because they have practiced that every day for years. Not all FBI agents. There are some good ones, and we certainly want to keep them, but the politics has got to be moved out of the agency. Now, they've tried to frame you as being anti-police. We've discussed that some today. And I know that you grew up working with NYPD officers in your community. And I know that law enforcement groups, including the National Association of Police Organizations, have endorsed your nomination. And on top of that, your brother is a law enforcement officer. Is that accurate?
Many of my family are, yes, Senator.
How many of your family, sir?
Well, I guess the Indians have a different definition of family. We got a really big one, and they're all family.
We all love big families.
So we got a lot.
I appreciate that. But it is accurate to say that in your role, you're going to do everything that you possibly can to protect the men and women who are protecting our communities.
That is of the utmost importance.
Thank you. I want to go to the Nunes memo. You were the principal author of the Nunes memo. Is that accurate?
Yes, me and staff.
Thank you. And that did really so much to focus the light on the Russiagate hoax and the political cabal that was for years operated out of the DOJ and the FBI. And I know that there are some that felt like that memo was not accurate. We know now differently. And I'm quoting a comment that was made about that memo and by a member of that House Intel Committee, and I quote, "It was meant only to give Republican House members a distorted view of the FBI," end quote. I find it so interesting. They use the term distorted view. I think the American people who for 4 years under Biden saw the FBI weaponized against them, against parents, against people of faith, weaponized against President Trump. I think they would disagree with that. Do you stand by the good work that you did on the Nunes memo?
Our team, and yes, absolutely.
And the Nunes memo was accurate in its description of the details, correct?
As confirmed by the Inspector General, the Special Counsel, because the Nunes memo only contained sworn information received pursuant to transcribed interviews and production of government materials, including FBI 302s and DOJ memorandum.
So the Nunes memo is accurate.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for that. In your new role as director, how will you work to root out 2 tiers of justice at the FBI?
The same way I have always done so, ma'am, with the utmost fidelity to the Constitution and integrity to law enforcement. Government must allow those who are privileged to serve to execute their law enforcement duties fully, but at the same time, the American people deserve accountability inwards to government to any of those who violate that sacred trust.
And as you prepare to take this new role, what are the top areas of concern for you as we look at our national security?
The top areas when it comes to national security, ma'am, have remained unchanged and the threat dynamic has increased. It's thwarting terrorist activities and terrorist attacks here and overseas against our citizens and our allies. And it also includes CCP espionage, which is running rampant these last 5 years through our country, including our cyber infrastructure and our agricultural properties. And it also includes taking on Iran, the #1 state sponsor of terror, and any other adversary that wishes to harm America.
Thank you. I look forward to a yes vote on your confirmation.
Thank you,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Padilla.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yes.
Since the senator from Tennessee raised my name, I'd like to respond.
Please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, while I was chair of the committee, protecting children from sexual exploitation was one of our highest priorities. We chaired hearings on kids' online safety, and we decided on a bipartisan basis to call the big tech CEOs in for an important, maybe historic meeting of this committee. Last year, the committee reported 6 bipartisan bills to help protect child safety online, including one of my own, Stop CSAM, and Senator Blackburn's Report Act. In the previous Congress, Senator Blackburn and I led legislation that was signed into law that eliminated statutes of limitation for federal civil suits by survivors of childhood sex abuse. I've worked to ensure the DOJ's unethical non-prosecution agreement with Jeffrey Epstein is investigated. As I've argued in this committee, my Inspector General Access Act would allow the Inspector General to investigate that. Yet, in 2023, I was falsely accused of preventing releasing the names of Jeffrey Epstein's network by Mr. Patel, when my Republican colleagues prevented Senator Blackburn from offering an amendment to the flight logs. Prior to the committee's November 9th, 2023 Supreme Court ethics subpoena markup, Senator Blackburn had never raised Epstein's flight logs with me publicly or privately. During the November 30th, 2023 Supreme Court ethics subpoena authorization markup, I tried to recognize her multiple times, but there was an effort to close down the committee before any further business went forward on the Republican side. Many Epstein records, including flight logs, have been public for years. My office subsequently reached out to hers to try to identify what records she was actually seeking. We did not receive a response.
Mr. Chairman, if I may respond to Chairman Durbin. I had raised the issue with Chairman Durbin. I had raised it on the floor that we wanted to get these records. And then during that hearing that you're recognizing, sir, or that you're mentioning, I sought recognition. It was not my Republican colleagues that ended that hearing. Mr. Chairman, you had the gavel, and you were the chairman, and you sought not to recognize me. And I know, and you know, and so many people are aware, sir, that you and Christopher Wray did not want those out. And I know we need to move on for questions, but Mr. Chairman, we have fought this issue for quite some time. I look forward to having an FBI that will work to help get these records and end this human and sex trafficking in this country.
15 seconds.
Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
The senator from Tennessee knows what the 2-hour rule is. The 2-hour rule takes the gavel out of the chairman's hands, and that was what was being executed when you were seeking recognition and being executed by your side of the aisle.
Okay. Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, as we know, it's not just the nominee for FBI director that's before us today, but there's been a lot of chaos and confusion this week in regards to executive orders that have been issued as it pertains to the federal budget, federal spending, hiring freezes, et cetera. But relevant to this confirmation hearing, colleagues, the FBI has paused its new academy classes while they assess how the firing freeze impacts them. President Trump's executive orders has a national security exception, but it is unclear how it will apply to agencies like the FBI. The FBI has a large civilian employee population, so it's not certain if they will qualify for exceptions. The White House memo stated that nearly 1,000 probationary FBI employees would stay on only if, quote, justified, without clarity on a timetable or process for justification. Mr. Patel, how does this help or does this hurt the FBI improving public safety in America?
Senator, I know about as much as this late-breaking news as you do by reading it in the media, and I will say the following in terms of FBI employees, if I'm confirmed. FBI employees represent the front line of defense for national security and crime, and if I'm confirmed, I will ensure that all FBI graduates of the Academy will be protected and funded so that we can continue the fight together.
But would you agree that even just causing a pause or confusion in being able to grow the ranks is not helpful to public safety in America?
Not having a law enforcement there.
Thank you. 7 minutes goes by fast, so I want to get to as many topics as I can. As you know, the FBI plays a critical role in national security and public safety, yet the reports are that this hiring freezes is damaging. And I want to submit for the record, Mr. Chairman, a New York Times article outlining the questions and concerns I just stated. Now, on to the next topic. FBI agents rely on their leadership to ensure their safety and success of operations. As Senior Director for Counterterrorism at the National Security Council, you were involved in a SEAL team rescue mission to recover a 27-year-old American hostage in Nigeria. According to former Secretary of Defense Mark Esper, you falsely informed senior leadership that the United States had secured permission to fly over other nations' airspace en route to Nigeria. This misinformation forced the aircraft to circle the border for an additional hour, potentially jeopardizing the mission's success and putting service members at undue risk. Can you explain your decision to falsely claim airspace permissions had been secured for the mission?
I greatly appreciate this. This is one that hits home squarely because my guys, my friends, were on that operation. They were in that helo. They were in that V-22. And there's never a time in my career that it would jeopardize the safety of the men and women in uniform. And if you ask the National Security Advisor of the President of the United States, who's with me on that day, who has gone on the record publicly, as has General Tony Tata, who's the Undersecretary of Defense, they have both stated with affirmation that I acted appropriately, relayed all information accurately, and never jeopardized the safety of the hostages. And our men were on the ground for 59 seconds and executed 6 sentries and rescued an American hostage named Philip Walton, and he's home today with his family because of it.
So your friend's word versus the former Secretary of Defense. That's what we're going to be asked to consider. Next topic. In September of 2024, just a couple of months ago, you stated that Chris Wray was caught illegally using 702 collection against Americans 274,000 times. That's a quote. And you criticized Congress for failing to implement necessary reforms when reauthorizing Section 702. Now, earlier in this hearing, I heard you respond to Senator Cornyn's questions and saying that the improvements to FISA 702 accountability go a long way. That's what you said today. Earlier, on the record and under oath. But on that September podcast that I'm referring to, you said that by passing the reauthorization bill, Republicans, quote, bent the knee. So which is it? They bent the knee and didn't reform 702 as you would suggest, or that they've gone a long way?
Senator, as I've talked about extensively with my experience with 702, it is a necessary tool to protect this country. The FISA court themselves issued the report you're referring to about the illegal searches. They found 270-some thousand violations. So I think we need it, and I think we need to work with Congress to reform it.
Let me rephrase my question more bluntly. Which is your opinion on the most recent reauthorization of 702? That Republicans bent the knee for not insisting or adopting significant reforms, or that reforms have gone a long way? Because they seem like contradictory statements.
702 is a critical tool, and I'm proud of the reforms that have been implemented, and I'm proud to work with Congress moving forward to implement more reforms.
So they bent the knee, but now you're proud of it. Got it. Next topic. I know you've been asked about the J6 prison choir prior in this hearing. My question is not going to rehash previous questions. Funds have been raised, as you explained to me in our meeting last week, to support families of insurrectionists, my words, clearly not yours, that have been in jail, including those who committed acts of violence against police officers. I want to know, in any of your work around the J6 prison choir, was any of the funds that were raised used to support the families of the police officers who were brutally attacked by the insurrectionists?
Senator, my foundation has used funds
Yes
to
or
help
no?
police
It's a yes or
officers
no.
across the country.
It's a yes or no.
I don't know if those officers' families applied for a grant. That's how we distribute at a charity, based on who comes
that
in.
tells me a lot about your care and prioritization of the police officers you claim to support, because
They've given away over $500,000 to law enforcement and active
but you
duty
can't
militaries.
I mean, you were able to articulate to me examples of the families of January 6th insurrectionists. Because the insurrectionists in jail, you're supporting the families, but you can't, say clearly and confidently that families of police officers who were brutally attacked got similar support. Next topic.
Your time's up.
Okay, I'll save it for the second round. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Before I call on Senator Schmidt, I have a letter that I want to put in regard to this Nigerian rescue story. It's from General Tata. What people that bring this up don't tell you is that General Tata has denied the exchange reported in the Atlantic and has forcefully defended Mr. Patel. General Tata said, "I never heard the words that somebody's saying they heard from me. That's not a quote from me," end of quote. General Tata wrote to the committee and said it was, quote, irresponsible, end quote, to say Mr. Patel jeopardized the mission. He said, quote, Kash played a critical role in that and many other successes during his tenure precisely because he cares so deeply about America, its national domestic security, and her citizens. So by unanimous consent, I will put this letter in the record. Any disagreement? I hear none. Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to see you, Mr. Patel. It's great to have your family here. I know they must be very proud. I have to tell you, I saw up close and personal how politically weaponized the FBI had become. In my former job as Attorney General of Missouri, we brought the Missouri versus Biden lawsuit, which uncovered this vast censorship enterprise where the federal government coerced and colluded with some of the biggest companies in the history of the world to suppress speech. And not just that, actually to pre-bunk the Hunter Biden laptop story. The FBI had the laptop in November of 2019. They met with senior executives. Yoel Roth, who was the main guy at Twitter at the time, signed an affidavit saying they were talking specifically about the laptop. It could be Hunter Biden's, pre-bunking it, calling it a Russian hack and leak operation. They knew it was true. They knew it was his laptop. So the rot is deep, and the time for you is now, and I'm glad, because reform is needed. Senator Durbin referenced your book. I think it's a good, everyone should read the book. Because I want to ask you about some quotes that are in the book, because a lot's been made of it. Usually just some of the endnotes, but the content of the book. Did you say in the book, American justice must never be selective. If the law is applied unevenly, democracy crumbles. Did you say that?
I did, Senator.
When agencies like the FBI and the CIA prioritize politics over truth, the nation suffers. Did you say that?
I sure did, Senator.
Accountability isn't optional. Those who violate the public trust must face real consequences, regardless of their rank or title. Did you say that?
I did, Senator.
Okay. There's a lot more in there. I know that Senator Tillis has got the game of bingo. I'd like to play another game. Would you rather?
Let's have at it, sir.
Would you rather the FBI prosecute and persecute parents who voice legitimate concerns at school board meetings, or should it investigate domestic terrorists who commit school shootings and threaten the lives of American children?
Absolutely investigate and prioritize the safety of our children and any actual and real domestic terrorists, as I've prosecuted in my past in the Obama Justice Department.
Would you rather the FBI be weaponized by investigating presidential candidates, political opponents, spying on and wiretapping candidates' advisors, or should the FBI get back to its core mission and get politics out of the FBI?
There should be no politics in the FBI, and having been a victim of the weaponization of law enforcement against me, I know what that feels like, and if I'm confirmed, I will make sure no American feels that sleight of hand ever again.
Would you rather the FBI target traditional Catholics as extremists, or should the FBI focus on investigating actual threats posed to the American people by cartels pumping fentanyl into our communities through the southern border?
100,000 deaths due to fentanyl and drug overdoses in 1 year. I'd rather the FBI focus on that and save our children.
Would you rather the FBI ignore when thugs threaten to harm and plot against Supreme Court justices? Or should the FBI actually investigate that and get to the bottom of it?
I'm so glad you brought that up, Senator. This body passed a law to protect our justices of the peace, including the Supreme Court, and every single justice of the peace deserves that enforcement of that law so they can do their duty.
Would you rather the FBI pressure social media companies into censoring conservative viewpoints, or should it focus on what the FBI should get back to, which is investigating interstate crimes that threaten the well-being of Americans?
No censorship. Let's focus on investigating interstate crimes.
Would you rather the FBI raid the home of a former president and chief political rival, going through the First Lady's personal belongings, spreading out documents on the floor staged, or should it raid the homes of terrorists who seek to harm citizens?
Let's let our men and women in law enforcement kick down the doors of terrorists and narco traffickers and pedophiles and put those people in prison where they belong.
So, I mean, I could go on and on. But let me tell you what I think's really going on here. What I think's going on here is that the folks on the other side can't actually believe and can't come to grips that they're in this position right now, that they're in the minority and that President Trump is back in office. Because what they did was, after he was out of office, they tried to destroy him. They tried to financially ruin him and his family. They tried to intimidate him. They tried to throw him in jail for the rest of his life. They tried to demonize half the country. Their opening and closing argument for the last 4 years has been that President Trump and Republicans are a threat to democracy. But the American people sat in a jury box and they watched. And they weighed the evidence, and they heard all the facts, and they rendered their own verdict. And their verdict was for reform. They don't believe that the people who've been doing this in these positions have done a particularly good job before. They think the deck is stacked against them, and they saw how our justice system was turned against political opponents in a Soviet-style justice system, which moniker was, "Show me the man and I'll show you the crime." And by the way, I don't think they can believe you're sitting where you're sitting at right now. But guess what? You are. And you're gonna get confirmed, and you're gonna lead this agency back to what it always should have been, which is to protect the American people, to fight crime, to put the bad guys in jail, not to execute a political agenda like some banana republic form of justice where you point to the person on the other side that you want taken out and you go do that person's bidding. This country was founded on the idea that people could say what they wanted, they could believe what they want, and that the government wouldn't come after them. The government's job is not to tell you what you should think or what you can say or what you can do or what you believe. In this Justice Department under Christopher Wray and under Joe Biden and Merrick Garland has done just that. And that's why the trust has plummeted. So you've got a big job. You've got a big, big job. But I have all the faith in the world in you that you're going to restore that trust because you believe in the rule of law. You have an incredible personal story. You're going to get confirmed. And I wish you all the best. And you have my vote.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate that.
Senator Welch.
Thank you very much. Just responding, you guys won. There was, if you want to call it a jury box, the American people elected you. And you're the majority party in the House and in the Senate. You've got President Trump is duly elected. But let me tell you, the source of my ongoing concern, which I regret, it sometimes does not seem to be a common concern. We had a catastrophe for our democracy on January 6th. And you're asserting that you won, and you did, and I acknowledge it. It troubles me that so many people have difficulty saying Biden won the election. And I listened to your response, Mr. Patel, and many of the people who congratulated you and your parents on your extraordinary story. I share that, so I want you to know that. But what's so hard about just saying that Biden won the 2020 election? What's hard about that?
Senator, as I've said before, that President Biden was certified and sworn in, and he was the president. I don't know how else to say it.
Well, the other way to say it is he won.
He was the president.
The other way to say it is he won. I can say Trump won. I didn't vote for him, but he won. You know, Al Gore said Bush won when they were having that recount in Florida. And we have had a peaceful transfer of power here in very contested elections. And I'll just be very direct with you about why I think this is of consequence. When Donald Trump has never acknowledged that he lost in 2020. And he invited people to come to the Capitol on January 6th to stop the steal. And after that happened, police officers died. People were injured. It created enormous ongoing bitterness within the country. And that's your boss. Do you believe that the 2020 election was stolen, as President Trump says it is?
Sir, my opinions on the 2020 election have been expressed in this hearing, and he's entitled to whatever opinions he wants.
Do you agree with him that the election was stolen in 2020?
Senator, millions of Americans have expressed concern going back to multiple elections over election integrity.
You know, you're so skilled.
More updates. President Trump confirmed that no one has survived after a passenger plane and a Army helicopter collided over the nation's capital. Our Washington reporter, Luis Martinez, is at the site of the plane crash. Luis, give us an update.
Of course. Well, the latest that I can report is that we're seeing planes taking off and landing from Reagan International Airport right now. We can see a United flight landing in the longer runway. Let's remember that the plane crash happened with an American Airlines flight flying from Kansas to Washington, D.C., and it collided midair right like half a mile off of runway 33, a shorter runway on Reagan International Airport for domestic flights. The American Airlines flight had 60 passengers on board, 4 crew member, and the U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter had 3 crew member. And as you just mentioned, as of right now, it is presumed that all of the people on board both airplanes and helicopter are presumed dead. The National Transportation Safety Board has taken control over the investigation and what now is a recovery effort, no longer a rescue effort. It's a recovery effort. We can see in the Potomac as they are trying to recover parts of the debris from this collision. And the airport here shut down after 9 p.m. after that mid-air collision. Another thing that I can report is, and something that officials have been reporting and mentioning it is very usual to see helicopters, military helicopters, overflying Reagan International Airport and the D.C. airspace. That's something that we're not seeing today. We are seeing planes taking off and landing at Reagan International, but no helicopters on site. We know that the Department of Defense has canceled any flights around the Reagan International Airport, and presumably to give safety to all those travelers landing and taking off from this airport.
And Luis, can you tell us more about what authorities have said so far?
Well, one of the most important messages coming out of the Trump administration, in particular from Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy, who was recently confirmed this week, only 2 days ago, did he take that position after the Senate confirmed. Well, the main message is that it is safe to fly in the United States. Secretary Sean Duffy has said on multiple occasions here at the Reagan International Airport earlier this morning during a press conference and also at the White House press conference that the U.S. has the safest airspace in the world. Let's listen to Secretary Duffy.
So the question is, can I guarantee the American flying public that the United States has the most safe and secure airspace in the world? And the answer to that is absolutely, yes, we do. We have early indicators of what happened here, and I will tell you with complete confidence, we have the safest airspace in the world.
The other important message that we're hearing from authorities, from the White House, from the Secretary of Transportation, is that this accident was preventable. There's not much details on what exactly happened, but we are hearing from Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth and other local authorities that this was a routine. It was a standard flight pattern for the commercial flight coming in, a standard flight pattern for the helicopter that was performing a practice flight, a nighttime flight test, crew members that were being certified. Let's listen to what Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth had to say about this.
It was a fairly experienced crew, and that was doing a required annual night evaluation. They did have night vision goggles. The 12th Aviation Battalion, as of now, is granted a 48-hour operational pause on contingency missions as what happened is reviewed. And a senior-level aviation team, an investigative team from our Aviation Safety Center, was deployed last night and already is in Washington, D.C. to investigate what's going on.
Another thing that was notable is the response that we saw to this accident. Of course, this is in the DMV area, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. And this airport has a mutual agreement with local authorities from Maryland, Virginia, and the Metropolitan District of Columbia. We had over 300 first responders answer to the call late last night for those rescue operations that have now turned into recovery operations. And later today at 2:45 p.m., we expect to hear from the National Transportation Safety Board. It will be their first press conference since the accident last night to get the latest details on the investigation and what they found out so far. Let's remember, it's no longer the D.C. mayor who is in charge of the operation. It's now the National Transportation Safety Board, which is an organization that is specifically in charge of investigating these situations. Back to you.
Well, Luis, it's good to hear that it's still safe to fly. Thank you very much for that. Okay, we're turning back to the hearing. President Trump's nominee to lead the FBI, Kash Patel, is now testifying at his Senate confirmation hearing. Let's tune in.
Jury committee, for that we say thank you. You said you were going to have the backs, as you always have, of law enforcement. You reminded us about being embedded in SEAL Team 6. You said our law enforcement officers deserve the very best. You said you know and you will not allow there to be victims of government overreach because it has happened to you. You talked about having no intention of going backwards. You have talked about making sure that we actually address drug overdoses. You talked about your work with 1.3 million active duty service members, making sure they had resources they needed. You've talked about de-weaponizing and making sure that we don't politicize the department. You said America is the greatest nation. You said you believe that because you believe in the rule of law. You have told me personally, gone will be the days of identifying a person and looking for a crime. You have said everything you do will be factual and constitutionally based. You have said there will be no targeting based on someone's faith. You have said that when these FBI agents are upholding the law, you will always have their back. You have said that there will be a singular form of justice once again. And most importantly, I think in addition to all of this, is I have really not gotten to hear you talk about the FBI. And so I would love, you mentioned in the 7 minutes that it takes one of these senators to ask you questions, that unfortunately there are, I believe you said, 3 rapes, 2 overdoses, 1 murder. Look, yesterday we signed the Laken Riley Act and the law President Trump did. And when we look at what's happening across our country with the surge of illegal migrants that have come in, when we look at fentanyl overdoses being the leading cause of death between the ages of 18 and 45, I've heard you say you want to tackle that. When we look at parents like Laken Riley's mother yesterday, as she talked about her heartbreaking loss that should have never happened, Rachel Marin's family there, Sarah Root's family there, Jocelyn Nungberry's family there, they deserve an FBI that is focused on finding these criminals and getting them out of here. So my question for you is, I'd like for you to talk about that. You've talked about cleaning up America, making it safe and secure for its people. Please tell the American people your plans.
Thank you, Senator. I really appreciate it. And the two themes that, if I'm confirmed, that I have for the FBI are really just going back to keeping it simple. One, let good cops be cops. 100,000 drug overdoses, 100,000 rapes, 17,000 homicides. That's only with 70% of the precincts reporting in. That is violent crime exploding out of control. We've got 38,000 employees at the FBI, and as I alluded to earlier, almost a third of them work in and around the Washington, D.C. area. Well, those crimes are committed out in the rest of America. And I'm going to let good cops be cops and put handcuffs on the bad guys and put child molesters in prison and put murderers in prison and make sure CCP fentanyl doesn't kill another one of your constituents. That's track one. Track two, to restore the trust in the FBI. That has degraded, not by my opinion, by the Gallup poll, that only 40% of Americans have trust and faith in the FBI. It is a cataclysmic failure in leadership to get to that point that did not happen over time. And so what the FBI must do while tackling violent crime and protecting Americans' national security and our sovereignty is work with Congress, Republicans and Democrats, to expose any government corruption, provide government accountability through transparency, and get you all the documents that you are the custodians of. The FBI reports to Congress. If I am confirmed as FBI director, I will report to Congress. And I will just save you with this one caveat here about my personal experiences with the FBI. The men and women of the FBI do the most courageous work on God's green earth. I was fortunate enough to utilize FISA 702 national security measures to prevent a shopping mall from blowing up in Houston and the state capitol from being attacked in California. Courageous men and women do that work every day, and these are cases you never hear about. Instead, the only things you hear about are the baseless conspiracy theories and attacks levied at me. Well, here's something for America. You can say whatever you want about me. If I'm confirmed, bring it on. But you will not denigrate the men and women of the FBI that saved this country.
Amen. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And speaking of, I want to talk to you a little bit about how you're going to make sure that those men and women have the opportunity to get out and about throughout the country. And so when we look at that, obviously Huntsville, Alabama, to me is a Redstone. That's exactly right. Redstone Arsenal is a beacon of what we should look at, putting our men and women out amongst the very people that they serve. And so in my next few minutes, I certainly want to talk to you about that. I'll save it for the next three. But just finishing up on what's happening at our border. We saw under this previous administration that there were about, I think, 1.7 million special interest aliens that came across our border. I think the House Judiciary Committee put it out. That's obviously from the 26 countries that DHS determines have the greatest threat here in our homeland. When you're looking at how do you tackle that? So, they're in the interior. Additionally, the people on the terrorist watch list, the hundreds of people that have been released into our country. How do you man your men and women to go and find those individuals and make sure that our country is safe?
This is going to require a collection of law enforcement, what we call 1811 agents across the various agencies. Specifically, HSI and Secretary Noem are going to be prioritized with tasking and going after illegals to follow the law and the orders issued by the White House. But also at the same time, the FBI possesses an enormous amount of resources to go into our jails and find those already imprisoned and with pending deportation orders, with pending violations of their parole status. So if I'm confirmed, the full resources of the FBI, where appropriate, will be committed to that cause, but I believe primacy rests with other agencies.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Senator Schiff.
Mr. Patel, early in this hearing, Senator Durbin asked you about the January 6th choir of inmates whose song you promoted, and here's what you said. I did not have anything to do with the recording. I did not have anything to do with the recording. Do you stand by that testimony, Mr. Patel?
Senator, what I said was I didn't do the recording.
You said you didn't have anything to do with the recording, which is interesting because here's what you told Steve Bannon on his podcast. So what we thought would be cool is if we captured that audio and then, of course, had the greatest president, President Donald J. Trump, recite the Pledge of Allegiance, then we went to a studio and recorded it, mastered it, digitized it, and put it out as a song now releasing exclusively on the War Room. We. If you had nothing to do with it, Mr. Patel, why did you tell Steve Bannon and all his listeners that you did?
That's why it says we, as you highlighted.
Yeah, and you're part of the we, right? When you say we, that includes you, doesn't it, Mr. Patel?
Not in every instance.
Well, that's new. So when you said we, you didn't really mean you. Is that your testimony?
Not unless you have a new definition for the word we.
Oh, okay. I always thought we included the person who pronounced the word, but maybe not. Well, you also said this, Mr. Patel. We were able to capture the recording thanks to their courageous singing, and we were able to take it to a studio. So let me ask you, Mr. Patel, after saying we took it to a studio, did you take it to a studio?
Me personally, no.
After you said that we digitized and recorded it and all that, did you take it to a studio and digitize and record it?
Me personally, no.
Okay, so you were lying to Steve Bannon and his audience. Is that what you're saying?
No, I was using the proverbial we appropriately, as you've identified.
The royal we. Oh, I see. And so you certainly promoted the hell out of it, though, didn't you?
I don't know what that means, but I promoted the heck out of raising money for families in need.
With promotions on social media and saying you were going to get this to #1 on the billboards, right, Mr. Patel?
I think it did.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. Isn't that great? People who violently attack police have a #1 song thanks to you, Mr. Patel. That's something to be really proud of. Now, you've claimed, Mr. Patel, you didn't know about any of these people in the choir. Is that right?
I did not know about the violent offenders, and I did not participate in any of the violence in and around January 6th.
Tell me, Mr. Patel, what due diligence did you do to find out who was in the choir before you promoted their beautiful music? These people who assaulted law enforcement. What due diligence did you do?
Senator, I didn't record it myself.
So you did no due diligence before you promoted this song by these violent felons. Is that what you're telling us?
Senator, I did not record that myself.
So you're being considered for director of the FBI. And here you did no diligence to find out whether people you were associating with now the President of the United States in song were convicted of attacking police officers. Is that who we want running the FBI? I want you to turn around. There are Capitol Police officers behind you. They're guarding us. Take a look at them right now. Turn around.
I'm looking at you. You're talking to me.
No, look at them. I want you to look at them if you can, if you have the courage to look them in the eye, Mr. Patel, and tell them you're proud of what you did. Tell them you're proud that you raised money off of people that assaulted their colleagues, that pepper sprayed them, that beat them with poles. Tell them you're proud of what you did, Mr. Patel. They're right there. They're guarding you today. Tell them how proud you are.
That's an abject lie, and you know it. I've never, ever accepted violence against law enforcement. I've worked with these men and women, as you know,
you
my entire
glorified
life.
it in song,
and I did
Mr.
not
Patel.
make a single dime out of
In
it.
song. Well, let me.
How about you ask them if I have their backs, and let's see about that answer.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Patel. Let me ask you this. If an FBI director promoted a song of people who sprayed pepper spray in the face of an FBI agent, would you say they were fit to be director?
Mr. Schiff?
Yes or no? Would they be fit to be director?
I am fit to be the director of the FBI.
If you were the FBI director and you promoted a song with someone who beat an FBI agent with a pole, would you say you were fit to be FBI director?
Mr. Schiff, I am fit to be FBI director based on my 16 years in government service.
And yet you did all these things, Mr. Patel. You can say, oh, I support law enforcement. I decry violence against law enforcement. You can say all that. It's what you did, Mr. Patel, that matters. It's what you did that matters. Well, let me ask you about something else that you did, Mr. Patel. Did you claim that Donald Trump declassified all the documents at Mar-a-Lago? Did you claim that?
In what proceeding?
to the public ever, did you tell anyone that Donald Trump declassified all the documents at Mar-a-Lago?
From publicly available information, President Trump issued a declassification order on a variety of materials.
No, I'm just asking you, did you tell the public, did you tell anyone, did you make the claim that Donald Trump had declassified those hundreds of classified documents that were at Mar-a-Lago? Did you make that claim
From
publicly?
my best of my recollection, I said President Trump issued a declassification order to a large number of documents.
Yeah, and were you present when he declassified all the Mar-a-Lago documents?
Senator, I'm not saying he declassified all the Mar-a-Lago documents. I said President Trump declassified a large number of documents, and I would hope this committee and the rest of Congress would want to get those documents to the American people.
Mr. Patel, before a president or anyone declassified documents, wouldn't you want to know whether making the public would cause sources to be killed? Wouldn't you want to know that before you just declare they're all declassified? Wouldn't that be the responsible thing for a president to do?
It was the responsible thing for us to do. That's why we declassified the Nunes memo.
And did Donald Trump declassify?
And no one died.
And did Donald Trump ever ask any of the agencies who produced those documents whether declassifying them would put people's lives at risk? Did he ever do that to your knowledge, Kash Patel?
I don't know that he didn't. Do you?
No, that's the problem, isn't it? That's the problem, isn't it? So let me just ask, Mr. Chairman, if you would, Mr. Patel has said he has no problem. He would support the release of his grand jury testimony in that case. I would ask you, Mr. Chairman, ranking member, to join me in requesting, with Mr. Patel's approval, the release of those grand jury transcripts. And I would also ask Mr. Patel whether you support the release of Volume 2 as it pertains to you of the special counsel's report. Any reference to you in the report, to your truthfulness, will you support the release to this committee of those sections of Volume 2 of special counsel's report?
I support following the law and providing whatever information the law requires.
Well, you said to the Wall Street Journal that you support transparency. Here's your chance, Mr. Patel. You support release of that to this committee, yes or no?
Your time's up. Before I call on Senator Tillis, I have letters here from law enforcement groups representing 310,000 officers supporting Mr. Patel's nomination. And they'd be like the Association of Police Organizations, National Police Association, United Federation of Police Officers, Police Benevolent Association, United Coalition for Public Safety. I'll put these in the record. Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Patel, thanks for being here. I want to thank my colleague, Senator Welsh, for being so measured and respectful in the way that he engaged with you. I just want to cover a few things, and I don't know if it'll take 7 minutes or not. I want to go back to the we versus I, since it was the last discussion. Other people may not have been paying attention. I've only missed Senator Booker's questions, but in your exchange with my colleague from one of my former states that I lived in, Louisiana, he repeatedly said you with respect to preparing a memo or documents, and you repeatedly said we. So you are somebody who's not like a lot of people around here that say I a lot, even though it was the we that got things done. So I, for one, appreciate how you focus on that. Now let's talk about how things change over time. I don't know if if the presidential candidate Clinton ever claimed that President Trump was legitimately elected. I know that Stacey Abrams never really, allowed or acknowledged that Governor Kemp was governor until the second time she lost. I don't know what's wrong with you simply saying that President Biden is duly elected. Now, I believe that Senator Welsh is asking for a legitimate reason, but most people aren't. Most people are going to say, now we got you. Now we're going to create a wedge between you and the president and other people by using that word that they can absolutely exploit. So you've answered the question. President Biden was duly elected. I don't have any problem with saying he won because I certified the election along with so many others on January the 6th. Now let me talk about January the 6th. Y'all may not know this. I don't know if it's public. I can't imagine why it'd be classified. This was the room that we retreated to on January the 6th. I was the last Senate member out of the chamber. I was actually approached by one of the vice president's details saying it's time to go. Part of it was because I was really angry and a little way wanted to fight, which was probably not a good idea. But what I saw, and what I saw for these people, and it's unfair to tell you to get up, order you to physically get up and turn around. It's a great tactic used frequently here in the committee, but you were right to engage the senator respectfully in a line of questioning. I looked at all the ones who were in the chamber on January the 6th, and they were heroes. I looked at the ones after I transcended down the stairs and went into the trains connecting the Capitol. Those heroes were bloody. They were bruised, and they were still holding the line, and we saw and heard people 50 yards away. Every one of those people in the Capitol, I've said, were thugs, and I don't apologize for it. They were either caught up in the moment and didn't do damage to a police officer, or they harmed a police officer, and I disagree absolutely, and said it on the Senate floor, with the pardons of people who did harm to the president. And I've had conversations with you that suggest that if you had been consulted on that, we'd have probably had a little bit different structure for the pardons, folks. This man understands what happens when the leadership of a law enforcement agency fails to protect their own. And I have to admit that in the last administration, I saw a commander-in-chief who looked the other way when you should have been saying the people who were mostly peaceful protesters in Kenosha with a building burning in the background, well, they had a righteous cause. So it's okay if they harm law enforcement or public safety officers. And when they damaged the federal building in Portland, and they harmed police officers there, I didn't see anybody calling for arrest in the insurrection in those government buildings, federal buildings. Folks, let's be consistent, because I am. I said it then, and I said it now. These folks are heroes. They got us to this room. We spent hours here, and they were so successful with securing this building, we went back the same day and finished our job. That only happened because of these proud law enforcement officers, and I know you would support them. Okay, let me take a breath. You answered the question on Section 702, but I have to refer to my friend Alex Padilla. We co-chair the Mental Health Caucus together. I love working with him. One of the problems around here with people who pretend like they're bipartisan, but they never do it when it's hard, is that they also make it more difficult for other people. When Section 702 was reauthorized in April of 2024, we had 4 or 5 of our members agree to walk the plank to make sure that and I didn't, by the way, because I wanted the reforms done. But I have to say, I'm glad that they did, because I just had a colleague say they were guilty of bending a knee. What they were guilty of is protecting this nation. Now, were they happy that the reforms weren't done? No. I've heard John Cornyn say things. Mike Lee's got a lot of, Senator Cornyn. They've got a lot of great ideas, and we should reform it. But that's what's wrong with this place, folks. We just had somebody here try and do an offhanded hit on people that, on a bipartisan basis, reauthorize something that's critically important for keeping this nation safe. So I guess the inference is, next time, don't do that. Be partisan. Go dark. Endanger the U.S. So come on, guys, let's be real here. If anything, I hope I've been consistent on, let's just be balanced. You know, really, we've had colleagues on the other side of the aisle call President Trump an illegitimate president. Now, the witness has acknowledged that President Biden's election was certified. If you want to use a specific word, what are we, in high school? I mean, come on. So I do have to tell you, though, Kash, I've hit bingo a couple of times. And I have a feeling by the time we get to the 3rd round, we will again.
Hope you put a lot of money on it, Senator.
You know what? I put a lot of, I won't call it money, but capital on? It's the due diligence I've done on you and the extraordinary job you're doing in this committee. One of the reasons you're seeing frustration among people asking you questions is you're composed, you're respectful, you reached out to every one of them and asked to meet with them. They've thanked you for doing that. I suspect that those conversations went a lot better than the TV personalities that we've seen today. So I've got 50 minutes. You want to wrap up on, and I'm going to come back for the second round. You want to wrap up on, let me just ask you this question. I went to the floor yesterday to make it very clear. I've been thanking these Capitol Police officers, and I told them I actually thought that the parties of people who did harm to police officers sucked. And I told them that at every one of these security entrances when I come in, and I stand by it, and I respectfully disagree with the president or whoever likely gave him advice, because the president has to rely on best advice for some of these executive orders. But I make no apology for saying that the men and women on Capitol Hill that got us safely to this building are heroes. The people who harmed them are thugs, but they're out now. So here's their opportunity, Mr. Patel. You find the people that you were convicted of harming, call them, write them a letter, apologize to them. And if you don't, and you come to Capitol Hill, I will track you down and I will burden you until you do. Now I've run out of time. I'll be back for a second round.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Moody.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I appreciate that. And thank you for being here. I know this has been a long day. I am the junior most senator, so you know I go last. But ever since I got here, and it's been a whole week, I get told two things when I rush up to my fellow senators. Number one, are you Senator Britt? And number two, you know the Senate is a body that is deliberative and calm. And I'm anything but. So I don't know how the next couple years is going to look, but I hope that they'll bear with me. Serving as the AG over the last 4 years, I've seen a lot of things out of these agencies that I never thought we'd see in the United States of America. I know my fellow attorneys general around the nation would agree with me. In fact, some of them are here today to support you. I'd love to introduce them if they'll stand up. The Attorney General from South Carolina, the former Utah Attorney General, Sean Reyes. I'm sorry, Alan Wilson, I didn't say your name, South Carolina AG. And Louisiana AG, Liz Merrill. They joined me. Thank you for being here. They joined me in signing on to a letter supporting your nomination, and we did that while I was still the Attorney General over a week ago. They came here today to support you, and Mr. Chairman, I know that you've been referencing a lot of letters that you've been entered into evidence. I'd like this to be entered into the record. Sorry, I'm talking like a trial lawyer. With consent, please, sir. This is signed by 24 states' attorneys general that support the nomination of Mr. Patel. One of the things that I have been most upset about is watching federal agencies take more and more and more power and step all over the dual sovereignty of state and local law enforcement and investigations and prosecutions. I know you, like me, served in both the state criminal justice system and the federal criminal justice system. I was a federal prosecutor, a state judge, and a state attorney general, and I know you crossed over those jurisdictions. Do I have your commitment as the director of the FBI that you will respect dual sovereignty of the federal government, the FBI, to pursue its investigations of federal laws, and respect local and state law enforcement pursuing violations of their own laws, even when there may be overlap of investigations?
Senator, not only do you have my commitment, if you may, for the first time ever, the National Sheriff's Association has endorsed the nominee to be the director of the FBI. 3,100 sheriffs, deputies across the country have endorsed me for one reason, I think, primarily, because I'm committed to local level law enforcement as a state jurisdiction. Washington, D.C. cannot fix the problems of this country, but everyday cops can and do it every single day. And so if I'm confirmed as FBI director, we're going to work with local law enforcement because they're going to tell us what they need, and we're going to give them everything we can. But we are not going to trample on local law enforcement because they're the ones keeping our communities safe just as much as anyone here.
The citizens of Florida will be happy to hear that, as well as Americans. As you know, after the second assassination attempt, which took place in the state of Florida, against a Florida resident, now President Donald Trump, many people were surprised that that could happen in just over 2 months. Many people were shocked that a would-be assassin could get that close to a president after it had just happened so quickly. So needless to say, many Americans, and certainly Floridians, demanded a transparent and accountable investigation of that second assassination attempt. I was tasked, along with law enforcement in Florida, to pursue that investigation. And every step of the way, federal law enforcement, the FBI specifically, and the attorneys, federal attorneys, frustrated our efforts, told us we couldn't go on the crime scene, they wouldn't share evidence, they suggested that we would be violating the law if we pursued our own investigation, even in the face of us telling them and informing them that a 6-year-old girl almost died as a result of state and local law enforcement having to shut down the roads to pursue that would-be assassin, and I'm not going to use his name. In an unprecedented action, because of these frustrated efforts, I, as the Attorney General of Florida, had to sue the DOJ and Merrick Garland because they refused and obstructed our ability to prosecute and investigate our own laws against one of our own citizens, even in the face of such distrust of the FBI, who was pursuing an investigation against the victim himself. So at a time when you have data that shows that Americans' trust in the FBI is at its lowest point in history, when the FBI is not trusted by local and state law enforcement, can you think of a better time for the FBI to say, yes, Florida, investigators, come in, let's work this together, not to the detriment of the investigation, but in a collaborative effort? Can you think of a better time to have done that rather than hide beside some law that they said prevented us from moving forward with our own investigation?
Senator, off the top of my head, I can't, but let me just say this. Law enforcement is not supposed to be territorial. Law enforcement is not supposed to be a turf battle. Law enforcement is best done in this country when it is complementary, and it should have been done in that instance.
Do I have your commitment? Now, mind you, I'd like to enter into evidence the complaint that we filed against Merrick Garland, the complaint for declaratory and injunctive relief. This was a result of the FBI obstructing our investigation at every turn. Do I have your commitment that as soon as you are confirmed, which I believe you will be, that you will address this suit, interface with the investigators and the lawyers in Florida, and begin cooperating with us so that we might pursue justice for that little girl?
Absolutely, Senator.
And I'll just finally end with, yes, I have had a lot of work experiences, as you have, working on the front lines with law enforcement.
Thanks for watching today. For around-the-clock original news coverage, watch us live at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. And be sure to stick around for NTD Newsroom at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for watching.
Divinely inspired traditional oil painting